Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish businessman, Jason has a warm, friendly personality. Born in Limerick, Ireland, Jason has a twin brother named Wayne and an older sister named Tracy. He married Margaret Fitzpatrick in 2003 when he was 27. They later welcomed 2 children, a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah, whom they loved dearly. Jason's family seemed to be living a happy life in Ireland, but this happiness was short-lived. Tragedy struck in 2006, shortly after Sarah was born. Margaret suffered a severe asthma attack one night, waking Jason up because she was having trouble breathing. Jason immediately tried to help her by giving her medication and using her inhaler, but her condition quickly worsened. In a panic, Jason called an ambulance, but unfortunately, Margaret died on the way to the hospital. Jason Corbett was the director of a small packaging company in Ireland when he lost his wife, leaving him to raise his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends witnessed his deep sadness and struggled to cope with the loss. A year after his wife's death, Jason was looking for a nanny and housekeeper to care for his children. This led him to Molly Martens, a 25-year-old American woman. In March 2008, Molly moved from the United States to Ireland to take up a nanny job. A friend of Jason's accompanied him to the airport to pick Molly up. The friend immediately became concerned that Molly might not be suitable for the job. Molly's youthful appearance, flashy style, and heavy makeup aroused suspicion. With her bright jacket, cowboy boots, curly hair, and heavy makeup, Molly looks more like a stage performer than a responsible nanny and maid. Molly was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. After attending Clemson University for a while, she dropped out and decided to start a new life in Ireland. There, she worked as a nanny for Jason's family, taking care of his 2 children, Jack and Sarah. Molly immediately took to the children, showing them care and concern. Jason's friends noticed a significant change in him. He seemed to be coming back to life after a period of grief. As Molly and Jason's relationship deepened, love blossomed and they began dating. The family of 4 went on vacations together, which brought them closer together. They began to plan for their future as a family. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason took Molly to a coffee shop, where he proposed to her with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in the United States. She also convinced Jason to leave Ireland and move to the United States with her, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house, moved to the United States for work, and the family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina. The couple married in a beautiful ceremony attended by friends and family from both the United States and Ireland. After the wedding, Molly worked as a swimming instructor. But her main focus was raising Jack and Sarah. Jason, on the other hand, worked as a manager in the United States. At first, their life seemed perfect, but as time went on, their marriage began to fall apart. On August 1, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martens, visited Jason's family home, where he greeted them at the entrance and helped them with their luggage. Tom had brought a gift for Jason's son, Jack, a baseball bat, but Jack was out with friends at the time. Instead, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together, eating pizza. Jack returned home late that night, but Tom decided to wait until the next morning to give him the baseball bat. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason were in the master bedroom on the first floor, while their children, Jack and Sarah, were in nearby rooms. Molly's parents were upstairs in the living room. Hours later, at 3 a.m., Molly's father, Tom, called 911 in a panic. He claimed that Jason had attacked his daughter, Molly, and in response, Tom had hit Jason with a baseball bat. Jason was now unconscious and bleeding. During the call, Tom expressed his fear that Jason's severe head injuries could be fatal and urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Tom asked the 911 operator for help, and she instructed Tom and Molly to perform CPR to try to revive Jason until paramedics arrived. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found Molly in the yard near a car, looking distressed and shocked but not crying. Inside the house, they discovered Jason Corbett's body in the master bedroom, surrounded by blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly both had blood on their clothes. A baseball bat and a large pebble with blood on them were found near Jason, along with an overturned lamp. Jack and Sarah had been sleeping in their room during the incident. At the police station, Tom Martens, 66, a 30-year veteran of the FBI, stated that his son-in-law was mentally unstable and had been abusing his daughter. According to Tom, Jason had been drunk that night. Everyone had gone to bed, but Tom was awakened in the middle of the night by screams and loud voices coming from downstairs. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran down the stairs. When Tom entered the master bedroom, he found Jason strangling Molly with both hands. Tom yelled, "Let her go." In response, Jason turned to him and said, "I'm going to kill her." Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death but claimed they had acted in self-defense. Tom immediately felt the need to protect himself and those around him. He swung the baseball bat at Jason, but the blows seemed to have no effect. When Jason tried to drag Molly into the bathroom, Tom intervened, trying to stop him. The situation worsened when Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall and his glasses to fly off. At this point, Tom felt his life was in danger. Jason then spotted the baseball bat on the floor and reached for it. Molly quickly responded by grabbing a rock and hitting Jason in the head, yelling, "Don't touch my dad," as she did so. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tom picked up the baseball bat and repeatedly hit Jason until he fell to the floor. Molly, 32, provided a consistent account of events during her interview. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up with a nightmare that night, which caused Jason to become angry and attack her. Jason allegedly began strangling Molly, threatening to kill her, and her father intervened to protect her. In order to protect her father, Molly claimed to have hit Jason on the head with a heavy rock. When asked where she got the rock, Molly replied that she had placed it on her bedside table. The rock had originally been used for drawing pictures with children as part of a gardening project, but Molly could not remember exactly how many times she had hit Jason, describing the incident as a desperate fight for her life. During her interview, Molly told police that she was still in pain from the alleged strangling incident. Photos of Molly, which showed a red mark in the middle of her neck, were compared to photos taken of her when she was arrested. However, the comparison did not reveal any red marks on her neck at the time of her arrest. Molly later admitted that the fight with her husband had actually occurred the day before the tragedy, in which Jason had grabbed her arm and neck. During questioning, she repeatedly complained of a sore throat. Both Molly and her father, Tom, testified that Jason had abused his wife, but Jason's family disputed these claims. Jason's sister, Tracy, noticed that Molly was controlling of Jason, often becoming upset if things did not go her way. She also noticed that Molly did not want to socialize with Jason's family members when they visited. Additionally, one of Molly's friends shared a disturbing claim that Molly had claimed to be friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until her death. However, this contradicted the family's account, as they knew Margaret had died of an asthma attack, not cancer. Despite Jason's relatives' warnings and attempts to intervene about Molly's unusual behavior, the wedding still takes place, marking the beginning of a complicated and troubled marriage. Over time, Molly's behavior began to raise concerns. Jason noticed a major change in her personality and suspected that she might have mental health issues. She was initially kind and loving, but now seemed manipulative and controlling. This worried Jason and led to more problems in their relationship. Molly began distancing herself from Jason's family by cutting her phone calls to just seconds. Before her death, Jason took steps to protect his children, Jack and Sarah. He named his sister, Tracy, as their legal guardian in case anything happened to him. Tracy knew that if Jason died, Molly would have custody of the children. After Jason's death, Tracy traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, preparing for a legal battle with Molly. During her troubled marriage to Jason, Molly consulted with an attorney to understand her rights to Jason's children in the event of a divorce. The lawyer suggested that she record their arguments and gather evidence that could be used against Jason. As a result, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared unresponsive, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as his voice grew louder. After Jason's death, Molly confided in a close friend about her marital problems, describing Jason as controlling and abusive. She accused him of forcing her to have sex, verbally abusing her, and becoming increasingly aggressive toward her over time. Despite this, Molly never reported Jason's behavior to the police. For days after Jason's death, his 10-year-old son Jack and 8-year-old daughter Sarah were interviewed by a child welfare specialist. During the conversation, they shared their thoughts about their parents' relationship. The children described seeing their mother, Molly, being careful not to wake their father, Jason, for fear of him getting angry. Jack described a pebble on his parents' bedside table, explaining that they had brought it in because it was raining and planned to decorate it later. Both Jack and Sarah described witnessing arguments between them. According to the children, their father, Jason, often initiated these arguments, which included hitting, pushing, and swearing at his mother, Molly, over trivial matters. Jason's autopsy report found that he died of traumatic brain injury. He had suffered approximately 12 severe blows to the head with a baseball bat and a rock, all concentrated in the same area. The injuries were so severe that his scalp was torn away from his skull and his skull was fractured. A toxicology report found that Jason's blood alcohol level was slightly higher than normal at the time of his death. He also had traces of trazodone, an antidepressant commonly prescribed to treat insomnia, in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. After Jason's death, his sister, Tracy, took their children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, which left Molly shocked and heartbroken. She tried to contact Jack and Sarah by phone and social media. Molly and Tom claimed they acted in self-defense against Jason, but the investigation into his death continues. Tracy has another theory. She thinks Molly killed Jason because he planned to leave her and take their children. Tracy believes that Jason told Molly about his decision on the night of the incident, and Molly, afraid of being alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah slowly adjust to their new lives. 9 months after their father's death, they revealed that they were forced to lie about domestic violence. They admit that Molly made up stories about their father's violent behavior, threatening to cut them off if they did not comply. The children clarify that their father had never abused Molly, contrary to what they had initially said. During the investigation, Molly's past relationship with her ex-husband Keith Megan came to light. Keith shared some revealing details about Molly's past. The two met on a dating website and quickly fell in love, moving in together just 6 weeks later. Keith described Molly as independent, fun-loving, carefree and unconventional. However, she eventually confided in him about her struggles with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned by the revelation, as Molly was on medication and appeared to be fine, apart from occasional changes in her behavior when she missed a dose. These changes did not manifest as violence or outbursts, but rather as clingy behavior during arguments, such as refusing to let Keith leave. Additionally, Molly would often spend hours in the bath, followed by periods of sitting on the cold floor and crying. Despite the difficulties they faced, Keith and Molly continued their life together and decided not to have children at that time. However, Molly soon revealed that she was pregnant, which took Keith by surprise. As the sole breadwinner, Keith was struggling financially and did not feel ready to become a father. Keith eventually proposed to Molly and she happily accepted, but due to her health problems, Molly continued to take prescription medication, including antidepressants, sometimes up to 16 pills a day. This caused Keith to worry about the effects of the medication on their unborn child. In a tragic turn of events, Molly had a dream that she had lost her baby, and the next day the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. The loss put further strain on their relationship. Molly fell into a state of grief and was diagnosed with major depression. Her parents began to view Keith negatively, seeing him as the cause of Molly's problems. Molly planned to leave Keith in the United States to find work as a nanny for the family in Europe. In March 2008, she packed her things and moved out of the apartment they were sharing. 10 days later, she called Keith, telling him that she was in Ireland, had found a job, and was doing well. This was the last time they spoke. Years later, in October 2015, Keith received an email from a police officer in North Carolina revealing that Molly had kept her relationship with Keith and her move to Europe a secret. The email informed Keith that Molly's new husband, Jason Corbett, had been murdered. When Keith watched an interview with Molly and her father, Tom, they described Jason as a cruel person, but Keith did not believe their story. He thought their feelings seemed fake. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder in Jason's death. At their trial in July 2017, Tom and Molly claimed they had acted in self-defense when they killed Jason. Tom said he had tried everything he could to keep himself and Molly safe. Tom admitted to beating Jason with a baseball bat, only stopping when he was sure Jason was no longer a threat. However, the prosecution argued that the severity of the attack showed a deep hatred for Jason rather than self-defense. Analysis of the bloodstains showed that some of the blows were delivered when Jason's head was between 30 and 50 centimeters above the ground, suggesting that Tom continued to attack even after Jason was no longer a threat. The presence of stains on Molly's nightgown near the area where Jason was struck suggests that she was nearby during the attack. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young testified about the injuries he observed on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident. He stated that Molly had self-inflicted wounds to her neck, telling her to stop while he was taking notes on her injuries. Other than some dried blood on her face and hair, Lieutenant Young found no other injuries on Molly. Tom also had no injuries, only blood on his watch and under his fingernails. Notably, his glasses were not broken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also took the stand and described what she found when she arrived at the scene. When she examined Jason's body, she found that his torso was cold to the touch and had patches of dried blood. This contradicts Molly's statement that they called 911 immediately after Jason became unconscious. The police investigation discovered that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly listed as the beneficiary. Furthermore, it was revealed that Jason had financially supported Molly's parents. A neighbor of Jason's family testified at the trial. He recalled spending an evening with Jason, from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., drinking beer together. According to the neighbor, Jason seemed very relaxed at the time. The neighbor also witnessed Tom and his wife arriving at Jason's house, and noted that Jason warmly welcomed them and helped them carry heavy luggage into the house. After 9 days of witness testimony, listening to arguments, and viewing haunting crime scene photos, the jury reached a verdict within 3 hours. The court found Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martens, guilty of second-degree murder. Molly was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while her father was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Molly turned to her mother, expressing remorse. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Dawn Hachen. Dawn Marie Hachen was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington. She is the eldest child and only daughter of Donald Hachen and Diana Parle. Her father worked in a shipyard, while her mother was a homemaker. Dawn grew up with her three brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek, in Bremerton, Washington. Dawn developed a strong faith from an early age. According to her mother, she accepted God into her life at the age of 4. However, her childhood was also challenging. Her parents struggled with anxiety and depression, which often led to frequent conflicts at home. When Dawn was about 11 years old, her mother, Diana, left the family for another man. This new relationship resulted in the birth of another child. However, the relationship did not last, and Diana eventually returned to the family, bringing her newborn child with her. Despite these hardships, Dawn did well in school. She worked hard to achieve good grades and overcome her challenges. Her hard work paid off when she entered the prestigious Scripps National Spelling Bee at age 12. This achievement not only led her to the White House, but also gave her the opportunity to meet former President Ronald Reagan. Dawn graduated as valedictorian from Bremerton Christian School in 1988 and then attended Northwest College of the Assemblies of God Church in Seattle. During her college years, she met Nick Hachen, and they quickly formed a close relationship. However, Dawn's friends were concerned when she called Nick her other half after only a few dates, as they worried that Nick's assertive personality might not be a good fit for her. They wanted Dawn to find someone who would be unwaveringly supportive and emotionally committed. Nick grew up in Poulsbo, Washington, and his childhood shared some similarities with Dawn's. However, his family life was difficult. His father, Dan, was often distant and busy with work, leaving Nick feeling neglected. Nick's mother, Sandra, was busy with home daycare and foster care, which left Nick feeling like he was not a priority to her. He even felt that his mother favored his biological siblings and adopted children over him, leading Nick to believe that she hated him. Nick struggled with the emotional distance between his parents, especially his mother's long-term depression and his father's lack of attention. As a result, Nick lacked emotional support and connection from his family, which had a profound impact on his life. Despite his isolation, Nick found comfort and faith in the Bible and Christianity, which boosted his confidence during his teenage years but occasionally led to social isolation due to his growing self-assurance. Nick and Dawn first met in college. Initially, Dawn's friends found it strange that she liked Nick because his personality was completely different from hers. She was outgoing and confident, while Nick was not. However, as Dawn spent more time with Nick, she began to change. She was no longer the confident, independent, and driven person she once was. Instead, she became shy and indecisive, often agreeing with Nick's decisions even when they were not right for her. Although their relationship seemed unhealthy, their love for each other remained strong. Nick proposed to Dawn on Alki Beach in 1990, and they were married on April 20, 1991. As newlyweds, they moved to Bremerton, where Dawn worked as a loan officer and Nick became a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island near Seattle. Nick had always aspired to be a youth pastor at Christ Community Church, where he had previously had a good relationship with a pastor named Smith. However, Nick gradually drifted away from Smith when he found doctrinal agreement with Pastor Robert Billy Craig. Robert saw in Nick as nothing more than a tool to carry out his plan to overthrow Smith and take complete control of the church as senior pastor. Meanwhile, in 1997, Dawn and Nick faced housing problems due to frequent moves, living in houses they had renovated and sold. Dawn dreamed of having a family and a stable life. To solve this problem, Nick found a house in need of repair in East Bremerton and planned to move in, renovate it, and make it their home. However, the purchase and repair of the house put Nick and Dawn in debt. Although their relationship appeared perfect, with Dawn being Nick's supportive and accommodating wife, there were hidden problems that no one saw. Dawn even joked that if she and Nick broke up, Nick would stay with her instead of moving back to his parents' house. Meanwhile, Nick continued to borrow money from church members, putting him further into debt. He embarked on an ambitious project to start a Christian youth camp. Although the project was financially taxing, Nick committed to it because he had a strong desire to do so. Nick's story was closely related to Sandy Glass, a parishioner of Christ Community Church. When Nick was trying to find the right land to build his youth camp, Sandy confirmed once again that he had great ambitions. Sandy Glass's life had been full of ups and downs. She had faced many hardships in her life. Her first boyfriend died of an unknown illness, her father died in a construction accident, and her brother struggled with drug addiction. She married Jimmy, a carpenter, but their financial situation was strained because the family depended entirely on Jimmy's income while Sandy stayed home to care for the children. Sandy also struggled with her spending habits, often living beyond her means. This led to frequent arguments between her and Jimmy. These arguments sometimes caused Jimmy to express his frustration by yelling or withdrawing from the situation. To resolve their marital conflicts, Sandy and Jimmy sought help from the church and attended marriage counseling sessions coordinated by Nick. Nick had been the church's marriage counselor for many years. However, some parishioners filed complaints with Pastor Robert about Nick's counseling style. They were upset that Nick often asked personal questions and ignored other important issues. His discussions often focused on sexual issues, ignoring other aspects of marriage. Despite this, church members trusted Nick because he had the support of their former pastor, Smith. They felt that Nick would not have been entrusted with this role if he were not trustworthy. In the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert replaced Smith as senior pastor. Smith and his wife then left to do missionary work in Africa. Jimmy's parents, who were also church members, disagreed with his decision to seek church counseling. They were skeptical about Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. When Nick focused primarily on Sandy, they became even more concerned because they felt he should focus on both of them equally. The relationship between Nick and Sandy went beyond the boundaries of a normal mentoring relationship. They spent too much time talking on the phone, meeting at church, and even outside. This made Jimmy's parents feel that their relationship was inappropriate as they interacted frequently and acted intimately. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, also noticed Nick's behavior and spoke to him privately. She expressed her concerns about his inappropriate behavior and advised him to focus on his own marriage. When complaints about Sandy and Nick's relationship arose, Robert had to intervene. He warned Sandy that her relationship with Nick was unacceptable and needed to end immediately. However, Sandy felt that she had a special connection with Nick. She wrote a letter to Robert, expressing her anger and frustration. In the letter, she stated that she felt Robert did not trust her. The relationship between Sandy and Nick had a negative impact on those around them. Dawn and Jimmy, along with Jimmy and Sandy's children, felt hurt by this. At one point, one of their children told Jimmy that Sandy and Nick had talked about Nick becoming their new father when Jimmy died. At church, Dawn began to share her grief with her friends. She told them about her financial situation and her desire to have children, but Nick was against the idea. By the end of 1997, Nick was romantically involved with several women besides Sandy. He spent time with them in private and on phone calls that lasted for hours. However, Sandy dreamed of the beautiful future she hoped to have with Nick. She encouraged him to invest more in the plan to open a youth camp and develop a romantic relationship with her. She believed that both of them were brought together by fate. A group of women in the congregation had tried to clear things up with Dawn, letting her know that the problems in her marriage with Nick had not been her fault, but rather Nick himself. However, her life had not turned out the way she had expected when she had married him. Back on Christmas, Dawn had woken up feeling unwell. Still, she and Nick had decided to visit her family and spend the day together. Later that evening, they had gone to Smith's house and spent time with his family. Early the next morning, the 26th, Nick had planned to go hunting with Lindsay Smith's daughter and her friends. Before leaving, Nick had met his friends at the Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County. After a few hours in the woods without catching anything, they had decided to return and have breakfast at a local diner around 9 a.m. While everyone was eating, Nick had suddenly become concerned and said that Dawn and he had not opened their Christmas presents. Around 9:30 a.m., Nick had left the diner and returned home. At 10 a.m., he had discovered that his wife had died in a fire. Investigators had discovered that the fire had initially started in Nick and Dawn's bedroom due to a faulty space heater. The space heater had burned fiercely and quickly spread due to the presence of newspapers and wrapping paper in the room. The situation had been made worse by the presence of multiple propane tanks on the floor. There had been a surprising detail in the story. Less than an hour earlier, Nick had told his friends at the diner that he and Dawn had not opened their Christmas presents. However, when he had spoken to the authorities, he had said that they had opened the presents the night before. Nick had explained that his wife, Dawn, had been feeling unwell and had gone to bed. He also had said he had received a propane tank as a Christmas gift. Because they had frequently renovated their home, they had to use a space heater during the winter. This type of heater often lacks modern safety features, leading to fires and deaths. The police had found no evidence that Nick's story had been false. As a local pastor, Nick had been well respected in the community and there had been no reason to suspect him of any involvement in his wife's death. Nick's congregation had tried to support him during what they had believed was a difficult time. Pastor Robert had suggested a way to try to ease Dawn's grief through prayer. However, Nick had rejected the idea, saying he had wanted Dawn to not experience any more pain. This rejection had surprised Pastor Robert, as Nick had previously been actively involved in church activities, including exorcisms. Mary Glass, Sandra's mother-in-law, had soon become suspicious of Nick's role in Dawn's death. She had thought that Dawn's death had not been an accident. She had urged her husband to contact the police to investigate, but this had not happened. Shortly thereafter, the police had determined that Dawn's death had been an accident and the case had been turned over to Nick's insurance company. Nick had received a large sum of money from his life insurance policy. This had been a bit strange to his friends and family, but they had later understood that Nick and Dawn's large debts and Nick's desire to build a youth camp had made him need the money. Some church members had found Nick's way of grieving for Dawn unusual, but they had not voiced their concerns because they had thought that people process grief differently. The church community then had held a celebration of Dawn's life, where family and friends had gathered to share stories about her and remember her life. During the celebration, Nick had shown remarkable composure throughout the funeral. Additionally, friends who had been helping clean Nick's house had discovered pictures of Dawn hidden in the back of a closet. This had suggested that Nick had wanted to remove memories of Dawn. Nick also had begun to show a cold and indifferent attitude towards many people, including some church members, neighbors, and friends. Nick's behavior had become even more suspicious when he had quickly developed a close relationship with Dawn's mother, Diana, under the guise of mourning his widowhood. This had shocked and outraged many. Even Pastor Robert could not stand Nick's behavior and had asked him to leave Christ Community Church. This expulsion had been a huge blow to Nick and marked the beginning of troubles in his life. On April 10, 2001, Sandy and her attorney met with the district attorney to negotiate her plea. In exchange for immunity, she had to reveal a secret that had been kept since the morning of December 26th. Sandy recounted that on the morning of Dawn's death, Nick contacted her and said, "I did it." However, the conversation was interrupted by another call from the church informing her of Dawn's death. After the call ended, Sandy turned to Nick to clarify what he meant, but Nick simply said, "It's over, it's over." After several weeks, Sandy confronted Nick. At this point, he confessed to his crime. He had overdosed Dawn with Benadryl and then covered her face with a plastic bag to suffocate her. Dawn was still semi-conscious and had to watch as Nick murdered her. After making sure Dawn was dead, Nick arranged the crime scene to make it look like an accidental fire. He placed old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room underneath Dawn's body and placed propane tanks near the bed. He also arranged the fireplace to cause a fire in order to erase any evidence of his crime. Dawn's autopsy revealed no soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs or blood. However, this result did not accurately reflect reality because Dawn's red blood cells showed signs of carbon monoxide. The person in charge of Dawn's autopsy concluded that her death was an accidental fire, ignoring important evidence. One reason for this conclusion was that since Dawn was the wife of a pastor, it was thought that Dawn could not have been involved in any adulterous behavior. Although carbon monoxide bound to red blood cells, an autopsy revealed that Dawn did not inhale smoke. However, she had overdosed on the drug Benadryl, 5 times the normal dose. Some believe that this dose was not enough to cause respiratory failure. The pathologist also suggested that even if she had been asleep, Dawn would have reacted to the increased temperatures of the fire. Interestingly, crime scene photos showed newspapers underneath Dawn's body, but this detail was largely overlooked. Nick was finally arrested on September 12, 2001, in the Kinko's parking lot and vehemently denied any involvement in Dawn's death. Nick still faced a first-degree murder charge. His bail was set at $750,000. Sandy's testimony to investigators added to the frustration with the police over the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick a suspect or making an arrest. Sandy cooperated with investigators because she was angry that Nick had relationships with other women in the church and felt taken advantage of. She believed that God did not approve of their relationship and that therefore Dawn's murder was against God's will. Church members who were questioned described Nick's strange behavior and inappropriate relationships. They also expressed frustration that he did not buy Dawn a tombstone after receiving the life insurance money. On September 17, 2001, Nick appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. He alleged that the church had cursed him and that Pastor Robert was a much more evil influence than the police could understand. Nick's trial then began. Nick was initially charged with first-degree murder, but the charges were amended to aggravated first-degree murder, which carried a sentence of life in prison without parole. Witnesses who testified included women who had relationships with Nick and several church members who had confided in him. They provided information that helped the jury better understand Nick. They had shared details of experiences they believed involved visions and direct messages from God, but in reality, Nick had used these to rationalize and manipulate others. Smith's daughter testified, describing how she had been introduced to Nick through her father and how Nick had taken advantage of her during her teenage years. The sexual relationship between her and Nick had begun shortly after Dawn had died and continued until she had moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts had also testified, noting that Dawn's body had contained important clues regarding the events of that day. However, these clues had been ignored because Nick had been a pastor. Although there had been no signs of soot or carbon monoxide, which would have been unusual for a living, breathing person in a fire, the defense had vigorously contested these allegations. They had focused their efforts on portraying Nick's ex-partner, Sandy, as a jealous and vengeful man who had fabricated the accusations when he had discovered Nick's affairs with various women. On December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic death, the jury had deliberated for a day before finding Nick guilty of aggravated first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing on February 7, 2003, Nick had addressed Dawn's friends and family, asserting his innocence but expressing remorse for his actions and sharing his sorrow for their loss. Nick had acknowledged that Dawn had deserved better treatment and had been sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court had resulted in a modification of his sentence. The appeal had argued that the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder did not match Dawn's actual cause of death, as she had died from strangulation. The defense had argued that Nick did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court had ruled in favor of the appeal and commuted Nick's sentence to 26 years. Nick would be eligible for parole in 2025 and might be eligible for early release. Dawn had gone too soon, but not forgotten. She had chosen a life with someone she had trusted, but that had not come true. Sadly, that had led to betrayal and her heartbreaking death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. David came from a devoutly religious family and had a relatively normal upbringing. During his high school years at Princeton High School, David participated in various activities, including Bible Club, Chess Club, Science Club, and a cappella choir. David enrolled at Virginia Tech University after graduating from high school to pursue a degree in electrical engineering in Blacksburg, Virginia. Thanks to his exceptional skills in computer engineering, David landed jobs at leading defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She is the eldest of 6 children of Wayne Robinette, a preacher, and Phyllis Robinette, who worked at Walmart and sang in the church choir. The Robinette children's home environment was tense due to frequent conflicts between their parents, which led to harsh treatment. Louise and her sisters were sexually abused by a family member as children. This traumatic experience was a secret kept within the family. According to Louise's younger sister, Elizabeth, Louise played a protective, gentle, kind, and nurturing role. She comforted her siblings during their parents' violent conflicts and protected them from abusive relatives. At the age of 15, Louise met 22-year-old David Turpin at church. They kept their relationship a secret for fear of Louise's parents' reaction. However, when the truth was discovered, Louise's mother Phyllis eventually accepted their relationship, partly because David came from a devout Christian family and Louise convinced her. David and Louise decided to keep their relationship a secret from her father, Wayne, knowing that he would be furious if he found out. In January 1985, 23-year-old David visited Louise's school, Princeton High School, where he had graduated 5 years earlier. He convinced the staff to let him take Louise out of class, and she left willingly with him. They began their journey south, planning to elope. When Louise's parents discovered she was missing, they called the police. Before the police could catch up with them, the couple headed to Texas, where they planned to secretly marry. However, when they were stopped, they agreed to return to West Virginia. When they returned home, Wayne and Phyllis's reactions were surprisingly calm. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter, Louise, to date David. However, when he saw how much they loved each other, he realized that it would be difficult to separate them. So Wayne agreed to let them marry on February 11, 1985, in a small ceremony in Petersburg, Virginia. 2 years later, Louise's parents divorced and Louise's father, Wayne, took a job as the chief deputy assessor of Mercer County. After marrying David, Louise began to live more independently and freely. Louise was happy with her new life. In 1988, Louise gave birth to her first daughter, and 18 months later, their second child was born. David was then transferred to General Dynamics, and his family moved to Fort Worth, Texas. They settled in a modern neighborhood called Meadow Creek. Louise's family lived a lavish lifestyle thanks to David's high-paying job. Louise, eager to show off her family's newfound wealth, invited relatives from West Virginia to visit. Having grown up on a tight budget, Louise was happy to show off her current success. To make their visit comfortable, David and Louise paid all the expenses. The Louises welcomed a baby boy in 1991, bringing them even more joy. However, by 1992, the Louises were in debt. Despite their financial struggles, they continued to live a lavish lifestyle. In 1993, Louise became pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. In 1994, Louise's oldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary School. She looked neglected, with greasy, unkempt hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene. Her appearance made her the target of teasing by her classmates. In 1995, Louise's family welcomed a fifth child, a boy. Louise's family seemed carefree despite their financial difficulties and continued to splurge on luxuries, treating relatives to expensive meals. When Louise's younger sister Elizabeth joined them on their 1996 vacation in Fort Worth, they stopped at a casino in Louisiana on the way. While at the casino, Louise asked Elizabeth to babysit the children so she and David could gamble. They asked Elizabeth not to tell anyone about this, knowing that it was against their Christian values. During this visit, David and Louise's gambling led to losses. Tensions became apparent when David claimed that Louise had a serious gambling addiction and blamed Louise for their financial difficulties. While staying with Louise's family, Elizabeth was shocked by the family's disturbing behavior. David and Louise did not show much affection for their children and tightly controlled every aspect of their lives. Elizabeth was particularly concerned about David's behavior, as he often invaded Elizabeth's privacy by entering the bathroom while she was showering, making her feel uncomfortable and insecure. In May 1997, the Turpins had their fifth child. By September of that year, concerns about their eldest daughter and the possible signs of sexual abuse began to grow. In 1998, the family had a sixth child. Although David had a well-paying job, the family's financial situation worsened due to their frequent gambling, which caused significant financial strain. In the spring of 1999, the eldest daughter dropped out of school, as did the other children. Louise and David announced that they were homeschooling their children. In late 1998, the bank foreclosed on the family's home in Fort Worth, so Louise and David moved to Rio Vista, Texas, a less populated area. The new home that Louise and David had in Rio Vista was in serious disrepair when they moved in. It was dirty, stained, and smelled bad. Before moving into the Rio Vista home, the Louises had their seventh child. Over the next 6 years, the family added 5 more children. Over time, the parents, David and Louise Turpin, became increasingly irresponsible and abusive. They physically harmed their children, beating, choking, and whipping them with belts, often for trivial reasons such as not letting them go to the bathroom. The children were also severely neglected in terms of personal hygiene, with some only bathing once a year. Despite purchasing nutritious food, David and Louise often withheld food from their children, forcing them to starve. The parents would tease their children by leaving uneaten meals in plain sight. Instead, the children were fed cheap frozen meals, resulting in severe malnutrition. This neglect was evident in the children's slow development, pale skin, and youthful appearances that did not match their actual ages. In 2004, Louise's family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their old home in Rio Vista, which had become uninhabitable due to years of neglect, garbage accumulation, and rodent infestation. In 2008, Louise Turpin, then 40, had a shocking conversation with her sister Teresa. Louise revealed that she and her husband David had abandoned their Christian education and stopped attending church. Instead, they had become interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that she and David had engaged in wife-swapping, a lifestyle that involved having sex with other couples they met online. What was even more disturbing was that they often left their younger children at home, in the care of their older siblings, while they went out to meet strangers they had met online. This drastic change in Louise, who had always been caring and responsible, worried her older sister Teresa. Despite their financial struggles, Louise's family often went to Disneyland in matching outfits, taking lots of happy photos. Louise made sure to send these photos to her family and her parents. The only indication to Louise's family that the children were okay was through these photos, which showed them appearing happy despite being very thin. In 2014, Louise's family moved to Perris, California, about 20 miles north of Murrieta. By this time, the child abuse had reached an extremely violent level. David and Louise had tied their children to their beds with ropes. If the children tried to escape, the ropes were replaced with chains and locks. The children were locked in the room for around 20 hours a day, forced to endure the stench that permeated the air. In 2015, the family welcomed their 13th and final child. Soon after, the family traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. Faced with the horrors of their living conditions, Louise and David's 17-year-old daughter made the brave decision to seek help by reporting the abuse to the police. She climbed out of the window and quickly called the police on the phone. During a tense 20-minute 911 call, she detailed the deplorable living conditions and the countless abuses she and her siblings endured. With photographs of their desperate situation as evidence, she waited for the police to arrive. When police arrived at the scene, they witnessed a horrifying scene: a severely malnourished girl who appeared to be about 10 years old. The girl led police to the front door, where they found Louise. Upon entering the home, police immediately smelled a strong stench that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the strong odor, police continued to investigate and made a horrifying discovery: 3 younger children chained to beds. The home was in a state of extreme disarray, with trash and dirt covering the floor because there was no toilet access. Police quickly took the younger children to Riverside University Medical Center for evaluation and care, while the older children were taken to Corona Regional Medical Center. David and Louise Turpin were arrested on January 14, 2018, for child abuse and torture. Within 4 days, they faced multiple charges. Each of them was charged with 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abuse, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment. David Turpin also faces a separate charge of lewd conduct with a child under 14. Among their children, a 2-year-old child showed no obvious signs of abuse. In addition to being abused, the children were treated extremely cruelly by their parents. They suffered severe physical abuse that resulted in neurological damage. The children of Louise and David lacked basic life skills and knowledge. Although their parents, David and Louise Turpin, bought them toys, the children were not allowed to play with them. They were forced to stay up until the early hours of the morning, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not allowed to go to bed before that time. In 2018, the court took action against the Turpin parents. On January 24, the judge ordered that David and Louise have no contact with their children for 3 years, and that all contact be through their attorney. On June 21 of the same year, the court decided that there was enough evidence against David and Louise to proceed to trial. The trial concluded on February 22, 2019. On that day, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to 14 counts including torture, abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. During the trial, David and Louise had an emotional reunion with their children. The children appeared to have forgiven their parents and were affectionate toward David and Louise. Each expressed a wish for their parents to be well and shared that their lives were going well. David and Louise sincerely apologized for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success in life. David and Louise were subsequently sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of 2022, Louise, 53, and David, 60, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in their home shocked the community and beyond. The community came together to support the children, giving them hope and a new start in life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996, to Diana and Gregory Leck. Her father worked in healthcare logistics and administration, and her mother was a homemaker. Mackenzie grew up in El Segundo, a city in Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was a member of the swim team and played water polo. Mackenzie was a hardworking student with a strong interest in art, music, and animals. Mackenzie attended the University of Utah, where she majored in kinesiology and nursing and was a member of the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While in college, Mackenzie shared her feminist views and switched her political orientation from major party to conservative third party. Mackenzie worked at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. Mackenzie wanted to pursue a career in health sciences, discussed with her counselors plans to attend nursing or medical school, and expected to graduate in May 2020. The Mackenzie family lived a normal life until everything changed on June 17, 2019. On that day, Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City, Utah, after her grandmother's funeral. She arrived at Salt Lake City International Airport around 2 a.m. and texted her mother, "Just landed and love you, Mom." When her mother Diana answered a few moments later, Diana discovered that Mackenzie's phone was turned off. Her father Gregory also tried to call Mackenzie but was routed to her voicemail, causing Mackenzie's family to become very concerned for her safety. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents realized that her friends had not seen or heard from her either. Mackenzie's friends reported her missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, while Mackenzie's parents Diana, Gregory, and their 3 sons tried everything they could to find Mackenzie in California, Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority sisters organized search efforts in Utah. They even created a Facebook page called Find Mackenzie Lueck to attract national media attention to the case. As police searched for clues about Mackenzie, they discovered video footage of Mackenzie at the airport. She was then picked up by a Lyft driver and taken to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles away. Police checked Mackenzie's cell phone records, confirming that Mackenzie had been at the park. Police also discovered that Mackenzie had exchanged several text messages with a person named AAE, whom she had allegedly met on a dating website and planned to meet in person. Mackenzie's last text message to AAE was sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone records showed that both Mackenzie and AAE were at Hatch Park at the same time. Notably, at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting data or location information, indicating that the phone had been turned off. Police tracked AAE's cell phone signal, which led them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in a Fair Park neighborhood. Police found that AAE's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Since AAE was the prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance, police decided to execute a search warrant at his home. During the search, police discovered a newly dug area in the backyard. Inside this area, they found burned human bones, muscle tissue, and charred personal items. In a nearby alley, police also discovered charred fabric and other items belonging to the victim. after the DNA from the bones matched the DNA profile of the items found. Police identified the victim as Mackenzie. A neighbor reported a foul odor coming from a campfire in AAE's backyard, which was also fueled by gasoline, on June 17 and again on June 18. This is where police found a shallow grave containing bones and tissue. Police impounded AAE's car after detecting a strong smell of gasoline and finding a red gas can in the trunk. They discovered that a can of gasoline had been purchased at a local store at 9 a.m. the day Mackenzie went missing. After arresting AAE, police checked his cell phone records, which showed AAE's phone was in Logan Canyon, a location where he buried Mackenzie's body on June 25. Between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. police searched the area and found freshly disturbed soil in a wooded area near the main road, where they discovered a charred human body. On July 3, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was that of Mackenzie. Her hands had been bound behind her back with zip ties and rope. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, and her death was classified as a homicide. On October 7, 2020, AAE pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree indignity to a human body in connection with Mackenzie's death. AAE was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 5 years for indecent assault on Mackenzie. AAE was also charged with kidnapping another woman in March 2018, whom AAE met on a dating website. In addition, AAE was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 when police discovered child pornography on AAE's computer while investigating Mackenzie's death on July 2. The images reportedly showed children aged between 4 and 8. On October 1, 2020, AAE pleaded not guilty to these charges and the pornography charges were eventually dismissed. The tragic death of Mackenzie Lueck has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the entire nation. Her cheerful personality, zest for life, and desire to make a positive impact were suddenly ended by a senseless act of violence. Mackenzie's story serves as an important reminder to always be cautious and safe, especially when using online dating services. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett is an 8-year-old girl who has just completed elementary school. She lives with her single mother, Elaine, who has worked hard to provide her daughter with a comfortable life. Elaine always tries to give Jennifer a happy childhood, full of love and care. Thanks to that, Jennifer has become a cheerful, active girl who loves to explore and learn. However, Jennifer still has a common fear in children, which is the fear of the dark. Therefore, she often sleeps in the same room as her mother. Elaine understands this fear and is always by her daughter's side. On the night of August 9, 2009, mother and daughter slept in the same room again. But Jennifer did not sleep well, constantly turning and lightly kicking her mother, making it difficult for Elaine to sleep. Elaine woke up at 2:30 a.m. and suggested Jennifer sleep in her own room so she could rest before the new workday. But Jennifer replied convincingly, "Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight because I love you," and she went to her own room to sleep for the rest of the night. Elaine regretted the decision for a long time, but at the time, she couldn't have known what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine went to wake Jennifer but found her missing. She found the window facing the parking lot wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she said she hadn't heard any noise or screaming after Jennifer went back to her room to sleep alone. Their apartment was on the first floor, and the window in Jennifer's room looked out onto the parking lot, causing Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment wasn't the ideal place for her and her little girl to live, but it was the best they could afford at the time. However, Elaine's parents decided to help her and her daughter find a new place to live. They bought a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother planned to move there in a few months, and they were there the day before Jennifer went missing. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was extremely sad and remorseful. She said that Jennifer was all she had and prayed that she could return. The police worked tirelessly to find Jennifer. Fortunately, Elaine did not have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in the fields and accidentally discovered a little girl. When they arrived at the scene, the police found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett lying in the middle of a field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was serious, with a cut on her throat from ear to ear, causing her to lose a lot of blood and turn pale. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors tried to save her life. Due to the injury to her neck, Jennifer was unable to speak. After surgery, Jennifer's condition stabilized, the bleeding stopped, and her breathing was steady. However, when Jennifer woke up from surgery, her mental state changed dramatically. She began to fear all men, including male doctors, making it difficult for her to recover. During this time, Jennifer was constantly panicking and even reacted defensively when male doctors tried to approach her. Elaine tried to explain to her daughter that everyone around her wanted to help and care for her. However, Jennifer did not trust anyone. Her behavior was understandable when she finally revealed what happened to her that night. The challenge was to gently get the information out of her. Now, considering she was only 8 years old, this was really difficult. Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigators, so the detectives gave her a notebook and pen to write down her answers to their questions. Because she was afraid of men, Jennifer wrote a letter to her mother, who then forwarded it to the police. Although she was only 8 years old, Jennifer's written responses were surprisingly detailed and accurate. Jennifer explained that she went into her room, turned on the lights, and began reading a book to help her fall asleep. She eventually fell asleep but was then awakened by a stranger who carried her out of the house. The stranger ran down the sidewalk with Jennifer in his arms. As soon as Jennifer realized what was happening, she tried to scream, but the stranger covered her nose and mouth. The stranger then put Jennifer in his car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. However, Jennifer's instincts told her that something was wrong. She looked around and saw her mother's car in the parking lot, which made her even more confused about where they were going and why. Jennifer had been taught that the police were trustworthy, but she had also been warned not to trust strangers. Her fear and recent experiences with strangers made her suspicious of the stranger's words, and she sensed that something was wrong. Jennifer asked the stranger to drop her off at her grandparents' house. But he refused, saying that they were not home. However, she noticed that her grandparents' car was in the driveway, which suggested that he was lying. The man stopped near Jennifer's school, about 3 kilometers from her house. He told her to watch the moon closely and said that her mother would come when the moon changed color. Jennifer waited anxiously for her mother to pick her up, but her mother never showed up. She suspected that the man was preparing for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger announced that her mother would not be coming and that they needed to drive further. They stopped at a dead-end street, where Jennifer asked the stranger to prove that he was a real police officer. She questioned him, asking where his gun and badge were. When he said that his gun was in the back seat, Jennifer turned around to look for it. That was when the stranger removed her underwear. Jennifer then lost consciousness, so she was not sure how long she was under his control. Jennifer slowly regained consciousness as she was dragged through a field, her ankles constantly rubbing against the road. The pain from the branches and rocks stabbed into her back, but she pretended to be dead and kept quiet, realizing that this was her chance to survive. Her attacker eventually let go of her legs and left her in the field. Jennifer heard him walk away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the sound of the engine driving away. When she regained consciousness, Jennifer found that she could not scream, and she was not sure why. She mustered enough strength to bring her right hand to her neck, where she discovered an open wound. Her hand was covered in blood. The exact time she had been missing is unknown, but it is believed that she had been lying in the field for between 12 and 14 hours. As the sun began to set, Jennifer saw the lights of passing cars nearby and heard the sounds of children. A dog approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but no one came. Throughout her suffering, Jennifer was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious. Each time she woke up, she could not believe that she was not dead. Jennifer had accepted her fate, thinking that she would not survive. But everything changed when she heard the sounds of children nearby. Suddenly, something hit her leg. When Jennifer later regained consciousness, she found herself being reassured by a police officer who repeatedly told her, "You've been found, you'll be okay. Just stay with me." The officer's words provided comfort to Jennifer as she was loaded into the Lifeline helicopter. The aftermath was a challenging experience for 8-year-old Jennifer, who struggled to communicate due to her inability to speak. She had to write her answers down on paper to convey her story. Additionally, her fear of men made the situation even more complicated. To make her feel more comfortable, her mother stepped in to ask questions on behalf of the police, relaying Jennifer's answers to the officers waiting behind the door. What's remarkable about Jennifer's story is that, despite her ordeal, she was able to remember the stranger's name. She remembered the man telling her his name was Dennis and describing him as fat, with a possible scar on his face. Police also sought the assistance of forensic pathologist Lois Gibson. Although they could only communicate with Jennifer through gestures and notes, they were able to create an extremely detailed composite sketch of the suspect. The sketch was released in the hope of getting information from the public about the identity of the man in the drawing. Meanwhile, police continued to investigate the scene and found Jennifer's clothes about half a mile away, along with a man's clothes. Despite hopes of finding DNA on the clothes to catch the culprit, no matches were found. Jennifer gradually recovered from her injuries. Despite her young age, she showed incredible resilience. During her recovery, there was a moment when she was upset about a chocolate bar that she couldn't eat. She screamed in frustration and let out a weak sound. The doctors were amazed to see that her vocal cords, which had been nearly severed and were not expected to heal, began to miraculously recover. After a while, Jennifer was well enough to be discharged from the hospital. She returned home and went back to school, eventually finishing high school and college. After that, Jennifer decided to become a children's librarian. Even so, she never forgot what happened that night. Every day, she felt like she was chasing a criminal, and that the criminal could be anyone. Jennifer thought that it could be her new neighbor, or a stranger at the post office or the grocery store. She always felt like the person was watching her and would come back to kill her. Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan. For the first time in years, she was able to trust a man. They fell in love and Jennifer felt a little more secure. However, around that time, the clues to her attacker began to fade. The chances of finding him were slim. Her case was passed from investigator to investigator. But still no progress was made. 18 years after that terrible night, Jennifer received a phone call. It was a notice that Detective Tim Cromie was taking over her case and wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie pledged to do everything he could to catch the criminal. Jennifer trusted him, and Tim Cromie told her that he would do everything in his power until the end of his career to get the answers she needed about this case. To help with the case, Tim decided to involve FBI agent Richard Renison in the investigation. Richard had worked for the Dickinson, Texas police before joining the FBI. Tim and Richard discovered a large amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Jennifer's underwear, shirt, and other items belonging to the perpetrator were particularly important, so they sent a sample of the DNA found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although the detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in the 19 years since the crime, they understood that the age of the case could cause the evidence to not be prioritized in the lab. Despite the years, their work finally paid off. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the man Jennifer had described years earlier. The 8-year-old Jennifer had described the man with astonishing accuracy, even though she was on pain medication at the time and unable to speak. Dennis Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas. His DNA was entered into the national database after an attack on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. Dennis was released on parole on February 4, 2000. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for drunk driving less than half a mile from his home. He later remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Investigators Tim Cromie and Richard Renison found a lot of information about Dennis. In 1987, Dennis had been arrested in Dickinson, 3 years before the attack on Jennifer. The investigators discovered that he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer's residence, and Jennifer was able to confirm his identity as the kidnapper. They then requested a photo of Dennis's driver's license from when he was 19. Upon seeing the photo, they were shocked because the man looked very similar to the sketch created based on Jennifer's description at age 8. On October 19, 2009, Dennis Cyril Bradford was arrested. However, he claimed that he did not remember why he stopped near Jennifer's residence or why he had mistreated her. Dennis also revealed a detail that investigators did not know. After the attack, he felt so overwhelmed by guilt that he attempted suicide with a handgun. Despite reaching for the gun, Dennis was ultimately unable to pull the trigger and decided to seek psychiatric help. During his stay at the psychiatric hospital, Dennis accidentally visited the hospital where Jennifer was still a patient, and he was very close to her at the time. Immediately after the interview, the detectives informed Jennifer of Dennis Bradford's arrest. She expressed gratitude to the detectives, especially Detective Tim Cromie and Agent Richard Renison, for their efforts and their promise not to drop the case. She also admitted that she looked forward to facing Dennis Bradford in court because he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to choose a court date, and she chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. A turning point in the case came on May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, when Dennis hanged himself in his cell. Jennifer faced another challenge in her life due to the trauma Dennis caused. She almost lost the ability to conceive. Fortunately, Dr. Craig Witz, after hearing Jennifer's story, generously offered her his services for free twice in late 2012. As a happy ending, Jennifer and her husband eventually welcomed their daughter Jenna and then their son Jonah. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Valentina Trespalacios. Valentina Trespalacios was born on December 16, 2001, in Bogota, Colombia. She is currently studying international business and commerce, but her true passion is music. Since childhood, she has loved music and pursued this passion by studying and becoming a professional DJ. After receiving her DJ certificate, Valentina started her career in Colombia and quickly made a name for herself due to her talent and exceptional musicality. Throughout her career, she has made many friends from different countries. Valentina has had the opportunity to travel to many countries to perform and showcase her talent. She has performed with famous musicians and has toured more than 20 cities in her country. She has also participated in important international events, including festivals in Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. With her talent and musicality, Valentina has been recognized as having a bright future ahead. She is loved and sought after across the country and regularly performs at top nightclubs. Valentina is a cheerful young woman who is always smiling and loves to party. She also maintains social media accounts where she shares her performances and updates her followers on her daily life. Valentina shares two important aspects of her life on social media: her growing popularity in the music industry and her romantic relationship with John Poulos, an American she met online in late 2021. As their relationship progressed, their communication improved significantly. Initially, Valentina was not looking for a serious relationship, but she eventually became attracted to John, and their relationship turned into a romance. John Poulos, a resident of the United States, showed a deep interest in Valentina's life. Valentina invested a lot in their relationship, and John supported her financially to help achieve her dreams. Valentina took a cosmetic course, which included hyaluronic acid injections into her lips, and later, enhancements to her cheekbones. John also recommended surgery in silicone breast implants, which significantly changed her appearance within a few months. These changes made Valentina the talk of the town. John sent her money regularly and eventually decided to marry her. John Poulos initially planned to move to Colombia to live with Valentina. However, Valentina became suspicious of the relationship because she knew that John was extremely jealous and had hired a private investigator to monitor her every contact and activity. By January 2023, John had committed to marrying Valentina and began arranging the necessary paperwork. He had also rented an apartment in the northern part of Bogota, where he planned to spend weekends with Valentina until they found a permanent place to live. However, on January 22, 2023, a garbage collector discovered a blue suitcase in a dumpster near a park in Colombia. The suitcase was taped shut and surrounded by several trash bags. When the worker opened the suitcase, they discovered the body of a woman whose head was clearly visible inside. The worker was so frightened by the discovery that he drove several blocks away before calling the police. The Capitol Police Department quickly dispatched a team to investigate the incident. The officers who arrived at the scene witnessed a horrific sight. The victim's body was found in a suitcase. After several hours of investigation, the police identified the victim as Valentina Trespalacios. An initial examination of the body showed no signs of violence, no weapons or knives were found, and there was no dismemberment. However, after opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the victim was wearing pajamas with a belt. This suggested that the victim may have been attacked while she was sleeping. Additionally, police found a black cardboard box inside the suitcase containing items that could help identify the body, including a student ID card, a password that the victim often used, and several other documents and personal belongings. Investigators discovered something strange among the items they collected. These types of documents are not often found in similar cases. After finding the suitcase containing the body, the police contacted Valentina's family and learned that she had attended a party with friends on Saturday, January 21st. Forensic examination results showed that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Her body was found with severe injuries, including heavy bleeding on the right side of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck, indicating that she had been strangled. After Valentina's murder, the police began questioning her friends and relatives. They started asking questions about Valentina's relationships. As a famous DJ with a hot body, she was a very popular and well-connected person. Among those questioned, a friend of Valentina's expressed concern and suspected Valentina's boyfriend, John Poulos, of being involved in the case because of his excessively jealous behavior. At this point, suspicions turned to Valentina's boyfriend. John, and a closer investigation into him was launched. The police initially relied on surveillance cameras around John's home, examining his actions on the days of the crime. John Poulos arrived in Bogotá at approximately 8:53 p.m. on January 19th. Surveillance cameras recorded him entering the apartment with a blue suitcase identical to the one used to contain Valentina's body. This information made John the first suspect to come to the attention of the police, as he was also the last person to see Valentina alive. When detectives attempted to contact John, the call was routed to voicemail. Valentina's family had appreciated John's calm and kind personality, and they did not think he was involved in this terrible crime, especially since John and Valentina had a wedding planned. Suspicions about John grew when investigators visited his rental apartment. There, they discovered that John had left and was nowhere to be found on Monday, January 23rd. It is worth noting that John Poulos deleted his social media pages early in the morning after Valentina's death, making him the only suspect at the time. Investigators analyzed surveillance camera footage in the building from Friday evening to early Sunday morning. This helped them clarify the events that took place. The Colombian police and the prosecutor's office also reviewed several hours of video footage from cameras in the area where Valentina and John were. Camera footage and WhatsApp conversations played a key role in uncovering Valentina's final hours. Valentina and John were scheduled to meet on January 20th. John arrived on the 19th, cleaned the apartment they would share, and then texted Valentina. Valentina and John began arguing that night because Valentina was partying while he was away. John questioned whether Valentina was with any men. Valentina refused to answer, believing he was jealous and suspicious. John eventually reminded Valentina to meet on the 20th. Before the meeting, Valentina planned to visit some beauty salons for eyelash and hair extensions to feel more confident. However, on the 20th, Valentina and John disagreed about the date and only clarified their plans when surveillance cameras recorded activities at Valentina's apartment that evening. According to the surveillance cameras, on the 20th, John helped Valentina pack her luggage at 6 p.m. when the two moved into their new home. Valentina also made a video call to her mother and said she would return after the trip. The video also showed Valentina with John Poulos, who had rented a car to transport Valentina's belongings. Valentina and John were caught on surveillance footage entering her new apartment at 7 p.m. Valentina and John were caught on camera engaging in some activities before heading home. It was Saturday, January 21st, at 1 a.m. They took a taxi to a nightclub in southeast New York where Valentina was performing. When they arrived at the nightclub around 4 a.m., Valentina immediately started working. John Poulos stayed with her while she got ready. At around 5 a.m., Valentina's performance ended, and they then went into the club's office to meet the owner, his wife, and a companion. Valentina and John left the club around 6 a.m. That was the last time Valentina's friends saw her. She walked out of the club smiling and seemingly fine. Valentina reached out to a friend by phone on Saturday and said she had no plans to go anywhere. She planned to stay home with John and perhaps go out to dinner or cook together. Valentina's last conversation with her friend was via video at 9 p.m. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, said her 13-year-old son was the last person to talk to Valentina via video. Valentina was lying in bed with John, and they appeared happy. The family has no further information about their situation. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building recorded Valentina and John. Valentina was looking out of the apartment door while John stood in front of it, looking pensive, pacing back and forth, and occasionally grimacing. John was again caught on camera on Sunday, January 22nd, at 9 a.m. This time, he left the room with 2 bags of trash, and Valentina was not seen. John then drove to the parking lot, picked up a silver car and put the bags in the back seat. Next, he returned to the apartment, took 2 suitcases from the trunk, and brought them back to the apartment. At the apartment, a gray blanket was placed on top of the suitcase that John had taken out. It was 10 a.m. He put this suitcase on the cart for transport. A second bag was placed next to it, and in this bag was Valentina's head wrapped in a blanket. Before leaving, John observed the parking lot after parking and noticed that there was no one nearby. He also checked the area around the elevator to make sure no one was getting off. Then he quickly returned to the car and tried to lift the heavy suitcase into the trunk. Finally, he took the bag and put it in the car, then drove away. The surveillance camera recorded the car circulating at various points in the city. Around noon, John appeared to be looking for a safe place to dump the suitcase. The car then pulled into a parking lot and parked near a dumpster. At 3 p.m., John got out of the car, looked around to see if anyone was following him, then took out the suitcase, which appeared to be very heavy, and threw it into the dumpster. He then returned to the car, took out a bag, and placed it in the dumpster before closing the lid and exiting the parking lot. The car then traveled west until it reached El Dorado International Airport, where John was last seen at 4:30 p.m. The Department of Homeland Security announced a $1 million reward on Monday, January 23, for information leading to the arrest of John Trespalacios. Colombian authorities sought Interpol's assistance in issuing an arrest warrant for John as he fled the country's borders. On January 24, Panamanian National Police arrested John at El Dorado International Airport, just as he was preparing to leave for Turkey. Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting John from the country after Valentina's death. More than 14 criminal investigators were involved in the investigation, gathering evidence to clarify the truth. The result of this investigation included the analysis of more than 300 hours of video footage from security cameras, conducted in cooperation with the public prosecutor's office. An important discovery in the case was the finding of Valentina's cell phone near El Dorado International Airport. A security guard happened to see the phone on the grass while walking near a gas station and picked it up. After realizing that the phone did not have a SIM card, he took it home with the intention of selling it, not knowing it belonged to Valentina. However, the security guard's wife called him after realizing that the photo of the girl on the phone's wallpaper matched the photos seen on social media, as well as the photo of the young woman found dead in the trash. Unfortunately, the phone was put up for sale and repackaged because someone wanted to buy it. After leaving the nightclub, John and Valentina's driver gave his statement. The driver had been assigned to take Valentina and John to a nightclub in the south of the city. When John stopped for a moment, Valentina got into the car and shouted that she had written something. When the driver looked at her, Valentina seemed uncertain, and the driver checked his phone. The driver discovered that Valentina had warned him that she was in danger in a Spanish text message to customer service. John then asked Valentina if she was okay. While the car was being driven, John and Valentina conversed in English. The driver asked them if they were bilingual, and they answered yes. When they left around 4 a.m. that same day, the driver went to the nightclub with the couple. He then knew nothing about the incident until he was informed of Valentina's death a few days later. In the WhatsApp version open on Valentina's computer, a friend of Valentina's in Caragana provided the prosecutor's office in Bogota with conversations on Valentina's computer, which offered clues about what happened. One of the key pieces of evidence found in the investigation of Valentina's case was a discovery by one of her friends, who found the suitcase containing her body. This suitcase was believed to have been in the same location as Valentina's. The friend also said that on the day Valentina was in Bogota, she received messages from John Poulos and several selfies of him with the luggage. The suitcase John was carrying was very similar to the one investigators found in the case, though the color was indistinguishable. While it is unclear why Valentina left the WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, the messages helped investigators understand what happened at night when Valentina was killed. Forensic investigators determined that she died of asphyxiation due to being strangled with a rope. There were also signs of violence on her body. The autopsy revealed that Valentina died in her sleep. Criminologists came to this conclusion because she was wearing pajamas. All the evidence pointed to John Poulos being present at the scene. However, in the indictment, John did not admit responsibility for Valentina's death. He argued that his arrest in Panama was illegal because he did not have a lawyer to assist him. John was not proficient enough in Spanish, and a translator was not present during the 5-hour hearing. John was charged with involvement in Valentina's death and deleted his social media accounts. John Poulos was born on May 19, 1987, in Wisconsin, USA. He is married and has 3 children. However, he also has a criminal record related to violence against women, including a restraining order from his ex-wife. One of the women who had a relationship with John Poulos revealed that he frequently visited pornographic websites, spending up to 5 to 6 hours a day on them. She also commented that John often exhibited strange behavior, such as fantasizing in telling ghost stories. Another model who interacted with John Poulos on social media said that she knew him as being from Texas, USA. She stopped contacting him after he made a strange comment, including the words jealous and death. Specifically, John asked her, "If I was at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" When the woman refused, John replied, "There's a chance one of us will die of jealousy." The woman also said that although John donated money to her, she never chatted with him via video because his communication style was often erratic. It's important to note that John also displayed some suspicious behavior towards Valentina. He contacted Valentina on social media and began sending her money persistently and consistently. In this case, treating women like property was a red flag that the women overlooked, and they initially trusted him. John thought he could buy their trust with money from the start. Authorities investigating the case believe that John Poulos thought that the waste disposal system in Colombia was similar to that in the United States, where he lived. In his mind, the waste would settle in a container and eventually be disposed of. However, Poulos overlooked the fact that recyclers and people living on the streets regularly rummage through trash looking for items they can sell or use. John Poulos is currently being held in a separate cell in Bogotá. The next step is to prove that all the evidence links him to the crime and to find the real motive behind this horrific murder in Colombia. The criminal code stipulates a prison sentence of up to 50 years for the crime John was charged with. John Poulos was subsequently sentenced to 42 years and 8 months in prison, was banned from approaching or attempting to contact the Trespalacios family for 20 years, and was ordered to be deported from Colombia after serving his sentence. John's defense team said they would appeal the verdict. They argued that John was innocent of Valentina's murder. Valentina's situation is similar to many others. She thought she had found true love, but it turned out to be a mistake. Does anyone feel safe connecting with strangers on social media? Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jane Hilton. Jane was a familiar face in El Dorado Hills, California. She wrote for the Foothill Times and often reported on local social events. Jane had 6 children, whom she loved dearly and often inspired through her daily poetry. After earning her real estate license, she married Archie Hilton in 1984, but the marriage fell apart in July 1985. Seeking help, Jane approached her former boss, Will McLean, who owned a large house in El Dorado Hills. Will's daughter, Maureen Klein, lived there with her boyfriend. Will's nephew, Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl, were also staying in another room in the house. On July 6, 1985, Will invited Jane and his youngest daughter, Autumn Anchor, to live in his house. Will's house was crowded and had a lot of people coming and going. However, Jane and Autumn's first night there would be their last. At 3:30 a.m., Ricky Davis, 20, and his girlfriend Connie Dahl, 19, returned from a party and found Autumn wandering around outside. Autumn said she had been attacked and feared her mother would be angry. The three of them then went inside, where they found traces of blood in the hallway. When they entered the first room, which belonged to Ricky's mother, Maureen, the air became quiet. On the bed, they found the bloody body of Jane Hilton. She had stopped breathing. Because Maureen and her boyfriend were away on a camping trip and were not home at the time, Ricky and Connie called 911. Paramedics and police arrived at the scene, but Jane was pronounced dead at the scene. She had been stabbed 29 times, beaten, and bitten on the shoulder. This senseless murder led investigators to begin questioning those closest to Jane. Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, was at the top of the list of suspects. He was interviewed and provided a solid alibi, including DNA. Initially, Archie Hilton was the logical choice because their marriage was in trouble. However, he said that although they were having some difficulties, there was no sign that he and Jane were going to divorce. When Ricky Davis and Connie Dahl were interviewed, they both said that they came home early in the morning and found Autumn waiting outside. When they entered the house, they found the hallway carpet soaked in blood. The blood trail led them to the master bedroom, where they found Jane lying dead on the bloody mattress. The details and physical evidence in the case were scant, and the potential suspects all had alibis. The case gradually went cold. The cold case was reopened in 1999, and El Dorado County Sheriff's Department detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald were assigned to investigate. After a thorough review of the case file, they focused on a newspaper article about Connie Dahl, Ricky Davis's ex-girlfriend and Jane Hilton's roommate. In the article, Connie described the position of Jane's body when she was found, lying on the bed, as if someone had placed her in her usual sleeping position. However, this testimony contradicted Ricky Davis's earlier statement. Ricky had said on the recording that the body was found on the floor. But at the time, detectives thought they heard Ricky say that, but they weren't sure. Detectives questioned Connie for 3 hours. At first, she stuck to her story. But over the next 18 months, Connie was questioned 4 times. Each time, the detectives used techniques known to increase the likelihood of a false confession. They accused Connie of her role in the murder, and she was threatened with being charged with murder. As a result, Connie cooperated with the detectives, even though she had no actual role in the case. She was convicted of manslaughter and only served 1 year in prison. Detective Strasser and Fitzgerald lied to Connie, telling her that they would use DNA evidence to identify a suspect. In fact, no DNA evidence was collected or tested in this case. Instead, the investigators used crime scene photos and real events, such as the bite mark on Jane's shoulder, to provide information to Connie and guide her to recall events the way they wanted. Over the course of 4 interviews, Connie began to lose control and recall events from the case. However, this also allowed her to create a completely different story about the night of the murder, based on what she remembered and what investigators gave her. Connie Dahl gave conflicting accounts of Jane Hilton's murder. In one interview, she claimed that Autumn Anchor was present at the crime scene and was shot. In another interview, she admitted that she may have bitten Jane's shoulder. Connie also claimed that the murder began with an argument between Ricky Davis and Jane, which stemmed from Ricky's desire for Autumn to join them at a party, which Jane refused. Despite changing her story to fit the facts, Connie could not recall the murder weapon or where it was hidden. However, she implicated her ex-boyfriend Ricky Davis in the case, making him the prime suspect. Following Connie's confession, detectives interviewed Ricky Davis and Autumn Anker. Both stuck to their original accounts of the case. The detectives attempted to deceive Ricky by telling him that Autumn had also implicated him in the murder, but he did not change his story. Autumn told the detectives that she had no reason to protect Ricky and would not be swayed by threats of charges. Despite using coercive interrogation techniques, the detectives were unable to get Ricky or Autumn to change their statements. Therefore, they used Connie's confession to arrest Ricky. Connie accepted a plea bargain, agreeing to testify against Ricky in exchange for a reduced sentence. At Ricky's first trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, leading to a retrial. However, at his second trial in 2005, the jury found him guilty. During the trial, Connie took the stand and testified against Ricky. She explained that she had wrestled with Jane and accidentally bit her shoulder. Connie then walked out, leaving Ricky alone with Jane. Once outside, she heard Jane screaming, pleading, and gagging as Ricky continued to assault her. Ricky was sentenced to 16 years in prison for second-degree murder, largely based on Connie's testimony. Connie, on the other hand, received a reduced sentence of manslaughter and a 1-year sentence in county jail. Unfortunately, she died of a drug overdose in 2014. Despite his conviction, Ricky maintained his innocence. In 2006, he contacted the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, for help in proving his innocence. NCIP, a nonprofit founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rodolfi and Linda Starr, provides DNA testing services to convicted prisoners who claim innocence. Ricky's case was reopened in 2006 after he contacted NCIP. NCIP and the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office worked together to retest DNA from the crime scene. The retesting included Hilton's nightgown and biological material found under her fingernails. The retesting uncovered a DNA profile from an unidentified male. This DNA was found on both Hilton's fingernails and nightgown, indicating that they came from the same source. The results cleared Ricky, Connie, and Anker of any crimes. This also proved that Connie's testimony was false. The DNA test results also proved Archie Hilton innocent, but unfortunately, he had passed away by the time the results were released. The unidentified DNA profile was entered into the FBI's CODIS database, but no matches were found. While the new evidence supports Ricky's claim of innocence, there are still obstacles to overcome. NCIP successfully argued that if the DNA test results had been presented at Ricky's trial, the outcome might have been different. In California, the standard for overturning a conviction typically requires new evidence that clearly establishes innocence. This standard is extremely difficult to meet. An expert on false confessions, Richard Leo, reviewed the transcript of Connie Dahl's interview in 2015. He found that detectives used pressure techniques to force Connie to give a false confession that fit the detectives' preconceived ideas about Jane Hilton's murder. Then, in 2016, the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, helped sponsor Senate Bill 1134, which was intended to address these issues. The bill allows wrongfully convicted people like Ricky to prove that new evidence could convince a jury. It was passed in January 2017, after NCIP attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a motion for a new trial based on new DNA evidence. The bill was sponsored by former California State Senator Mark Leno and brings California standards in line with those of 43 other states. In 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malakian overturned Ricky's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. It was originally scheduled to begin in the fall of 2019, but due to the health of his defense attorney, the judge announced the trial would take place in April 2020. However, the trial date changed again. Advances in DNA testing helped Ricky become the first person in California and only the second person in the United States to be exonerated of a crime. A new DNA testing method called genetic genealogy helped achieve this result. Genetic genealogy is a new DNA testing method that involves taking DNA evidence from the crime scene and sending it to genetic companies. These companies then search genealogical databases to find a potential match. In February 2020, the DNA evidence matched a man. In February 2020, El Dorado County District Attorney Vern Pearson announced that a new suspect had been identified in the death of Jane Hilton. The man was identified through DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. Following his arrest, several residents who knew the man revealed his identity to the media. The man is known as Michael Green, a longtime resident of Roseville, California. Michael graduated from Oakmont High School in 1986. According to those who knew him, Michael was a nice and easygoing person. They even described him as very calm and cool. So, a former friend of Michael could not understand why he would commit such a brutal act in El Dorado Hills. Michael was 17 years old at the time of the crime. On the night of July 6, 1985, Jane Hilton's daughter Autumn met Michael and his two friends, Calvin and Stephen, at a park. Autumn then decided to go home to shower and said she would come back to see her friends. However, she went to another friend's house instead of going back to the park. However, that evening, Autumn returned to the park to meet the boys again. What happened next is only speculation. Investigators believe Michael took advantage of the moment to break into Jane's home and was discovered by her. In the struggle to escape, Michael may have attacked Jane in a frenzy. After the attack, Jane's body was discovered by Ricky, Connie, and Autumn when they returned home. Michael had no criminal record before or after the murder. Michael appeared to have lived a normal life until DNA linked him to the gruesome crime. Two other boys who were with Michael were sought shortly after his arrest. One boy, Calvin, had died some time ago. However, another boy, Stephen, was found and questioned the day after the arrest. Stephen is considered a witness, not a participant in the case. Michael was arrested on February 11, 2020. As Michael was a juvenile at the time of the murder, he made his first appearance in juvenile court on February 19, 2020. Michael was then transferred so that he could be tried as an adult. Michael waited 2.5 years before he was tried in court. On July 29, 2022, Michael pleaded no contest. This means that Michael waived his right to a jury trial, and he will face a charge of first-degree murder. He also waived his opportunity to object to the plea. His sentencing date was set for September 27, 2022, with Judge Suzanne Kingsbury presiding. During the sentencing hearing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor of educational psychology, was called to testify about adolescent development. Kaufman's research shows that adolescents have a variety of developmental needs, including emotional and cognitive development. In late adolescence, young people can distinguish between right and wrong, but their ability to control their emotions declines. To provide additional information, the defense called several witnesses from Michael's childhood who had maintained relationships with him into adulthood. When asked about their views of Michael after learning of his confession, all agreed that they were shocked he had committed the murder of Jane Hilton. Those who knew Michael described him as cheerful, well-liked, funny, and lovable, both before and after the murder. Michael's ex-wife, Karen Green, said, "Mike was not evil at all." After the witnesses finished testifying, each of Jane Hilton's children gave victim impact statements. All described the unforgivable loss Michael had caused their family. Heather Purvis McConnell, Jane Hilton's daughter, said, "The pain that will never go away will always haunt me." Ardith Brandon, Hilton's fourth child, said, "I love my mother and I think Michael loved her too. I want to know how he would feel or what he would say to the person who stabbed your mother 29 times. What would you do if you got a call in the early morning to tell you your mother was dead?" Ardith recounted collecting her mother's belongings from the house where she was killed and ended with a powerful statement: "We will always have something in common, regret for the stupid decision you made 37 years ago." Hilton's son, Ian, echoed his sister's sentiments. He went on to explain the hardships the family faced and the constant nightmares they endured, especially after being wrongly blamed for her sister Autumn. As he finished, he broke down in tears and said, "All the words we say will never bring my mother back." Autumn was the last to speak. Her testimony showed real pain as she recounted what she had been through over the past 2 decades. She recounted the day 2 detectives came to her home, telling her they had found the people responsible for her mother's death. She was later accused of biting her mother and helping move her body from the floor to the bed. Autumn said that if she had not sought the help of a lawyer at the time, she doesn't know how far the investigators' intimidation tactics could have gone. Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement on behalf of the family. In the statement, he questioned Michael about why he killed Jane in such a brutal manner. "You hit her. She had multiple injuries around her head and face. You kicked her in the jaw. You bit her shoulder. Why did you do that?" Linden went on to read a statement expressing that Michael did not just kill Jane, he destroyed many lives in the process. Linden then asked Michael if he thought about Jane and who she was. He pointed out her accomplishments and the love she had for each of her children. In her closing argument, Michael's defense attorney, Margaret Husher, emphasized that Michael was not in control of his actions. Margaret argued that Michael did not realize that his actions were wrong because he was a teenager at the time. This argument was based on expert testimony from Dr. Kaufman. She asked the court to consider a reduced sentence, reading various criminal codes and court rules. However, Judge Kingsbury interjected and stated that the court would not consider granting Michael probation, leaving the defense unable to add any further comment. In response, Linden thanked the court and said that the request for probation was an insult. He said it was like a slap in the face to the victim's family, who had suffered for decades. Linden stated that Michael had gotten away with murder for 37 years and that granting him probation would allow him to get away with more. Judge Kingsbury has heard many arguments about juvenile murder cases. In her 26 years as a judge, she said the murder of Jane Hilton was the most brutal. Before sentencing, Kingsbury asked the victim's family to forgive them for the pain they have endured. She also hoped they would overcome their pain, as that was their mother's wish. Kingsbury encouraged Michael Green to use all the resources available to him in the California Department of Rehabilitation. She said Michael could achieve parole if he used those resources. Kingsbury also said Michael had a great side and that he had a lot to offer. She also said he was young enough to be released and live a productive life. Michael Green was sentenced to life in prison and is being held in the El Dorado County Jail. He will then be transferred to the California Department of Rehabilitation. Restitution will be determined after further review by the court. Ricky Davis, who was wrongfully convicted of the murder, was released on February 13, 2020. He will be entitled to more than $750,000 in state compensation. However, his attorney argues that this amount does not make up for the years of freedom he has lost. Ricky continues to sue the state for damages covering the period from May 21, 2002 to February 13, 2020, for a whopping $18 million. The lawsuit is still pending as of 2022. In September 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2644, which prohibits law enforcement officers from using threats, physical harm, deception, or manipulative interrogation tactics when interrogating people 17 years of age or younger. District Attorney Vern Pearson is calling on all law enforcement agencies to stop using intimidation tactics. He says the deceptive tactics that have been used for years will assume guilt and focus on getting a confession instead of getting the whole story. The El Dorado County DA's office will now dismiss any case where the main evidence is a confession obtained through threats, lies, or psychologically manipulative interrogation tactics. The measures are intended to ensure that no one is convicted based on a false, coerced confession like the one that Ricky Davis made. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Juan Carlos Garcia. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971 in Monterrey, Mexico. She is the second of 3 children. Her parents, Maria and Manuel, did their best to provide their children with a good education and aspirations for a better life. Together with her brother Javier and sister Ana, Abril's family lived a simple but hopeful life. Abril, Ana, and Javier all excelled in school, participating in musical activities, sports, and developing their talents. However, Abril showed early on a special ability in mathematics and business skills. She was an avid reader and was always the best student in her class. As a teenager, Abril started working to become financially independent, saving and always having savings from her school days. She was very disciplined, able to plan and manage her time effectively. Her goal was to get a quality college education to secure a well-paying job with plenty of career advancement opportunities. After graduating from high school, Abril was accepted into the most prestigious university in Nuevo Leon, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her classmates described her as smart, focused, and ambitious, but also fun-loving, kind, and always ready to help others. After graduating, Abril was hired into the sales department of one of the largest and fastest-growing companies in the country. A few years later, she tried her hand at digital sales, a new and rapidly growing field, and realized it was the right fit for her. She quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the company's CEO within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and on her way to the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, provided for her family, and had many plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unstable, disappointing her loved ones. Abril believed that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. In the mid-1990s, when Abril's career was going strong, she met a young man named Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. A little over 3 years older than Abril, he had similar career ambitions to hers, which impressed her. In turn, he was attracted to her beauty, charm, kindness, radiant smile, along with her sharp intellect and strong determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious University of Science and Technology, where he excelled in the fields of economics and commerce. He then went on to study at Harvard University in the United States before returning to Mexico and building a successful career in the rapidly growing e-commerce sector. After meeting at a conference focused on the latest financial technologies, Abril and Juan Carlos met several more times as their companies worked on joint projects. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized that he had fallen in love with this intelligent and beautiful woman. Juan got Abril's phone number through mutual acquaintances, called Abril, and asked her out. Initially, they were both attracted to each other. Abril found Juan intelligent and energetic, able to chat about any topic. The relationship between the two developed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that time, both had achieved considerable success in their careers and were involved in developing online stores, a promising direction. Their life was like a real fairy tale, attracting the envy and admiration of those around them. After 3 years of marriage, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia, in 2001. At that time, Abril was 30 years old and she was extremely happy because the birth of the child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband also seemed happy and loved their newborn daughter. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son named Juan Carlos Jr. And 2 years later, the family welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Abril is a hardworking, active young mother who hardly takes any maternity leave. She still maintains a balance between her motherly responsibilities and her thriving career. Every day, Abril cooks delicious meals, helps her children with their homework, takes them to sports and tries to be a good friend to them. Their family appears to be perfect. They are wealthy, successful, and have 3 well-behaved children. However, appearances do not always reflect reality. The problems within their family were not known for a long time, even to those closest to them. In fact, one showed his true colors in the early years of their marriage. He was hot-tempered, aggressive, and very demanding. He did not like to compromise and wanted everything exactly his way. At first, Abril thought that over time, his personality would soften. However, Juan Carlos's true personality was still there. But they still had joint projects, and their teamwork brought impressive results. However, over time, he became more angry, and the verbal arguments gradually escalated into physical violence. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan had a period of calm, trying to restrain his emotions. But this restraint did not last. Unfortunately, after the birth of his eldest son and continuing after the birth of his 3rd child, he no longer tried to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos often vented his anger and negative emotions on his wife, not keeping any negative emotions to himself. He insulted and belittled his wife, who was the mother of their children, and it seemed that she had to endure this suffering. He often physically abused his wife, but in order not to leave any marks on her body, he forced her to hide her injuries with clothes or makeup. All these actions were done to protect his perfect reputation and pride in being considered a good man. Abril kept silent for many years, trying not to tell her sister and mother about her terrible life. She could support herself with a well-paid job and could raise her children, giving them a good and stable life, but her husband was a rich and influential man. He could use his power and money to gain custody of the children through the courts, forcing her to stay silent and endure this abuse for a long time. Knowing the true nature of Juan Carlos, Perez could not accept that her daughter and son were left alone with someone who could do anything without control. The family situation reached a dead end by the beginning of 2010. Those who had thought this was an ideal family began to suspect that something serious was going on inside. Abril became desperate, terribly thin, suffered from insomnia, and often had bruises on his face and body that became difficult to hide and impossible to explain. Juan Carlos remained calm and confident, pretending that everything was fine in public. He continued to portray the role of a loving and caring husband, polite and affectionate to his wife, but the reality was completely different when he was at home. He became a cruel person, making it dangerous to be around him. Although Abril's loved ones asked for a divorce, Abril insisted that everything was fine and that she would resolve the issue with her husband herself. 2014 marked the peak of Sanchez's career when he became the director of a large trading company and one of the most influential people in the field. After his promotion, his family moved to Mexico City and settled in a large house in one of the capital's most beautiful neighborhoods. Their children attended a prestigious private school. Abril hoped that the move and the complete change of scenery would improve their relationship. However, the opposite happened. Juan continued to hurt and insult his wife, even in front of their children. He began to accuse her of infidelity without any basis. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to violence, claiming to find evidence of her infidelity. He monitored her phone and emails, and banned her from using social media. After that, finding no evidence, he even hired a private investigator to follow Abril and take pictures of any man who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, although her husband's behavior became completely unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare. On the surface it seemed like a happy and successful marriage. Many people were even jealous of Abril because she had a famous, influential, wealthy and, as many thought, caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family visited the Perez family in Monterrey to celebrate Christmas. However, Juan Carlos continued to treat his wife roughly, even in front of her parents. The incident left them extremely shocked and appalled. After witnessing this, Abril realized that she could not continue living like this and decided to divorce. She informed Juan of her intention, but he reacted with rage, choking her to the point that she almost fainted. The incident only stopped and Abril's mother entered the room and intervened. Upon returning to Mexico City, Abril decided to divorce and moved to another bedroom in the house. However, this did not protect her from her husband's violence. On the morning of January 4th, her husband entered the bedroom and attacked her with a baseball bat. Abril was lucky to escape death by slipping out of bed. She screamed, and their children ran into the room. The youngest son protected his mother while the eldest son took the baseball bat from his father. Together, they ran out of the house and to the hospital where Abril received the medical attention she needed. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep wound above her eyebrow, which required stitches. Shortly after Abril and the children left the house, Juan Carlos contacted a lawyer and posted on social media about the conflict between him and his wife, claiming that his wife had betrayed him. Juan Carlos also claimed that his wife had taken all the money from the safe and that when he tried to stop her, she had stabbed him with a knife. As evidence, he posted a photo of a bloody knife and blood stains on the floor. However, the blood on the floor was actually Abril's, from her own room. The photo of the knife was also taken from the internet. Despite this, Juan Carlos' friends believed his story and reshared it on social media, drawing attention to the incident. While still in the hospital, Abril sued her husband for intentional injury. After being discharged from the hospital, she left the house and moved in with her sons. According to the temporary decision, she was granted sole custody of the children. Their eldest daughter, now of age and in college, sided with her mother and denounced her father's cruelty. Juan was ordered to pay alimony to his ex-wife and sons while they lived with their mother. The amount of alimony was relatively small, about $300. However, Sanchez refused to pay and faced jail time. However, given his status as an influential businessman, he believed he would not face any punishment. After experiencing the nightmare, Abril decided to return to her hometown of Monterrey, to her parents' house, taking her children with her. There, she filed for divorce and monitored the situation. At the same time, she began providing online support and counseling to women in similar situations. She also planned to open a center for psychological and legal support for victims of domestic violence. However, the judicial system was disappointing. It was not until September 2019, 8.5 months after the incident, that Sanchez was arrested for causing bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was sent to prison, but after just over a month, he successfully appealed and was released in November of that year. The case was presided over by Judge Federo M., who surprisingly reclassified the case, leading to a new trial. During the trial, Abril's hospital photos and entries from her medical records were not presented. At the same time, the testimony of the woman and her sons was not considered sufficient grounds to detain Juan Carlos. Furthermore, Juan insisted that his ex-wife was turning the children against him. Juan was released immediately from the courtroom because Judge M considered that his actions did not pose a direct threat to the victim's life. According to the judge, if Juan had really intended to end his wife's life, he would have done so, especially since she was asleep during the attack and could not resist. Abril was shocked and frightened when she learned that her ex-husband had been released. She immediately realized that Juan had all the connections and had paid off his way out of jail, putting her and her daughter's lives at risk. She wrote a formal letter to the judge expressing her fear and concern for her life, but it did not seem to have any positive impact. After being released, Juan Carlos initiated a lawsuit for custody of the children. He demanded that she return to Mexico City to attend the hearing, and if she did not attend, the case could be decided without her, which would certainly be disadvantageous to her. She had no choice but to return to the city. Returning to Mexico City was a tragic scene that Abril could not avoid. On November 25th, Abril overcame her fears and went to Mexico City. She feared the man she had been living with, but she knew she had to face reality to protect her children. She planned to leave the city immediately after the hearing and had already bought a plane ticket back, which Juan Carlos also knew. On the day of their custody hearing, a tragic incident occurred. After the hearing, Abril, her sons, and their lawyers got into a car and headed to the airport. However, when they reached a traffic light, a motorcyclist stopped next to their vehicle and suddenly pulled out a pistol, firing 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He then quickly fled the scene. 1 bullet passed through and grazed the youngest son, who was sitting in the back seat, but fortunately none of the children were seriously injured. Abril was taken to the nearest hospital, where doctors tried to save her life for more than 6 hours. However, due to severe injuries and loss of blood, they were unable to save her, and she passed away that evening. Abril's family immediately flew to the capital and asked the authorities to arrest the person they believed was behind the attack. However, law enforcement agencies had a different view. They said that without identifying the shooter, it would be difficult to determine his motive and the details involved. Meanwhile, Juan Carlos remains free and the police begin searching for the perpetrator, a process that could take a long time. The orphans have been placed in the care of relatives on their mother's side for the time being, while their father prepares for another legal battle to regain custody. Abril's sister wrote a social media post criticizing Juan for the incident. However, her account was blocked and later deleted. Nevertheless, Abril's family decided to continue fighting and draw public attention to the case. They stressed that the attack occurred on a day dedicated to protests against domestic violence, which made the incident even more despicable. The public outcry forced the prime suspect, Juan, to flee. Abril's family drew attention to the tragedy that had befallen them. At the same time, people also began to openly discuss many cases of men trying to kill women but being unpunished and still going free. Mexican politician and women's rights activist Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo has officially confirmed that Abril's case will be reinvestigated and classified as femicide. Judges could face consequences if Juan Carlos's guilt is proven. Juan Carlos, a businessman who posts frequently on social media, has called for his ex-wife's perpetrators to be found and punished to the fullest extent of the law. He has stated that despite his disagreements with his ex-wife, he would never harm the mother of his children. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, has taken a stand against her father and left an angry comment, accusing him of cruelty and including photos of her mother in the hospital after Juan Carlos attacked her with a baseball bat. Despite the case receiving extensive media coverage, it was decided to leave Juan free while the investigation is ongoing. He has been placed under a restraining order and must report to the police weekly. However, after he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest. As expected, no one could find the defendant. Juan used his money and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexico contacted Interpol and reported the fugitive accused of serious crimes. The next day, Juan was declared an internationally wanted man. To investigate the case, the police hired a crime scene reconstruction expert. During this time, they also tried to locate the hired criminal. The results showed that he did not act alone. Street camera footage showed 2 vehicles following the car of Abril, her children, and their lawyer from the courthouse. The motorcyclist committed the murder and appeared to be in constant contact with the people in the aforementioned cars to receive instructions. Investigators spent months identifying some of the people involved in the incident. Finally, on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. Surprisingly, the participants in this case did not resist arrest. They immediately began to confess to their actions and surrendered in the hope of reducing their sentences. Through investigation, it was determined that the real mastermind was Juan Carlos. He paid a large sum of money to 7 people who directly participated in this act. The first people to be arrested were the driver of the car that participated in the chase and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. The investigation also showed that, before the incident, Juan Carlos hired several experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards while in prison. One of these criminals was released a week before the incident, and the other was released a few days later. After being released from prison, Juan contacted his accomplices again and asked them to find trustworthy people to carry out an assassination. He promised to pay a large sum of money to each of them if they succeeded. Once all the participants were identified, Juan transferred the promised money and provided details of the route and vehicle the victim would use. However, the most difficult part of the plan was luring Juan's ex-wife to Mexico City. He resorted to threatening Abril that he would take the children if she did not appear in court. Although she complied with the court order, she had no intention of staying in the capital and planned to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan learned this information from his sources. It was not until late October 2020 that 3 people involved in the criminal conspiracy were arrested. They were initially arrested on suspicion of distributing narcotics. It was only when they were brought to the police station that it was discovered they might be involved in a serious crime. All of those arrested were members of a major drug trafficking gang headed by Maldonado, also known as Balto. He served time with Juan Carlos and protected him. Maldonado then agreed to help Juan in the murder of his ex-wife in exchange for a large reward. Maldonado was arrested in November 2020 and began to testify. According to his testimony, Juan had been looking for trustworthy people to end the life of his ex-wife, and Maldonado agreed to help. With these statements, it was clear that Juan was both a client and an organizer of the crime. The previous attack on Abril with a baseball bat was reclassified as attempted murder. The court eventually issued an arrest warrant for Juan on charges of murdering his wife. However, his whereabouts are currently unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining participants in Juan's commissioned murder were found and arrested. One of them was arrested for another crime at the time. In addition, during the extended search, the weapon used to carry out the fatal shots was found. A total of 9 people involved in this criminal group have been arrested, of whom 7 were directly involved in the pursuit and murder of Abril. Although it has been nearly 5 years since Abril's death, the main perpetrator and the person who hired him to carry out the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still at large and his whereabouts are currently unknown. The person who directly shot the mother of 3 children was sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 other criminals who participated in the car chase and assisted the shooter were also sentenced to 50 years in prison each. The other arrested participants are still under investigation, and their fate has not been decided. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalie Connelly. Natalie Connelly is a beautiful and charming woman who has a stunning appearance identical to her twin sister. Her sister is equally beautiful, and they share a close bond not only because of their similar appearance but also because of their deep connection. Natalie has a special ability to bring joy to those around her. She can easily make people laugh and chat with anyone she meets. Despite facing the challenges of being a single mother, Natalie always strives to ensure that her daughter, Madison, does not lack anything. Her care and love for Madison are evident in her constant presence and attention. In a crowded bar, Natalie meets John, a charming and elegant man. They are attracted to each other from the beginning, and their relationship gradually blossoms. John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. They exchange contact information and begin to delve deeper into their relationship. As Natalie spends more time with John, she feels an irresistible attraction to him. This was evident from the moment they first met, even though she had no idea of his profession or wealth at the time. As they grow closer, John reveals that he is a millionaire. His wealth is displayed through lavish gifts and fancy dinners at top restaurants. Natalie is fascinated by John's gentlemanly and elegant style, as well as his lavish mansion. However, behind John's charming exterior, there is much more mystery. His life is far more complicated than he lets on. While engaged to a pregnant partner and expecting a second child, John hides the existence of 3 other children. His relationship with Natalie is actually an affair, which continues even as John deals with the breakup of his previous relationship. Eventually, John chooses to turn his attention to Natalie. Their romance seems like a fairy tale from the start. John and Madison become close quickly, and Natalie soon wins the hearts of John's children. John treats Natalie to lavish and romantic experiences, from spa trips to hiring a chauffeur. It seems like he is making all her dreams come true. However, when Natalie moves in with John in Kinver, Stafford, England, the truth slowly emerges. Their relationship, initially fueled by passion, reveals its true nature once they live under the same roof. As they spend every waking moment together, they begin to understand each other better. However, John's interests start to annoy her. He enjoys intimate interactions and often leaves bruises and scratches. Romantic gestures and lavish dinners lose their appeal as Natalie realizes that she has to pay a high price for all of them. Natalie once thought her relationship with John was a fairy tale, but now she realizes the harsh truth behind it. Fearing abandonment, she still accepts John's demands during their intense sexual encounters. She recalls how John abandoned his pregnant ex-fiancée and fears the same thing will happen to her. Despite this, Natalie still feels fulfilled in the relationship and does not want to leave because she fears returning to her old monotonous life. She seeks comfort and guidance from her sister and mother, sharing the bruises and scratches John leaves during their intense sexual encounters. She admits that John enjoys causing her pain. Natalie faces a difficult situation as her relationship with John brings her happiness but also has negative aspects. She is caught in a dilemma of wanting to maintain her luxurious lifestyle with John while being dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of the relationship. The tension between them increases as they both seek out other relationships. As John continues to chat with other women, Natalie also begins texting other men without John's knowledge. When John discovers these exchanges, he becomes very angry. Although John makes no secret of his interactions with other women, he strongly objects to Natalie interacting with other men, highlighting the unfairness of their relationship. Despite John's attempts to hide his insecurities, he invites Natalie out for a casual evening on December 18, 2016, which includes drinks, football, and dinner. John forces Natalie to drink heavily and even offers her cocaine, albeit in smaller amounts than he consumes. This was not the first time he had created such a situation, suggesting a pattern of behavior intended to make Natalie more comfortable before committing bad acts on her when they were home alone. This raises the question of whether Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions was an attempt to dull the pain she knew she would endure behind closed doors with him. John wanted to be in complete control of the situation, ensuring he could carry out his intentions towards Natalie without being hindered. Therefore, he carefully controlled his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a mild state of intoxication that did not affect his performance during their sexual encounters. After what seemed like a pleasant day out, ending with a satisfying meal at one of their favorite places, John arranged for a driver to take them home. However, beneath the normal appearance, John's evil intentions were hidden. That day, Natalie was in a drunken state, which only worsened as dinner failed to sober her up or absorb the alcohol. She was disoriented, stumbling out of the car as they arrived home, accidentally leaving her phone behind. Instead of letting Natalie recover from her drunkenness, John had other intentions. He returned to retrieve Natalie's phone, but it is unclear whether he had seen her messages. Natalie became the victim of John's cruel actions as he attempted to inflict maximum harm on her. He attacked her in various ways, including punching, kicking, stomping, and the disgusting act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, John used a bottle of carpet cleaner, using its nozzle as a weapon. After the attack, he left Natalie naked and bloody at the bottom of the stairs, her dress pulled up around her waist, leaving her to suffer from her injuries. Natalie lay motionless in a pool of blood when John left the bed. A few hours later, when he awoke, he discovered that Natalie had died from the severe injuries she had sustained, totaling 40. John's subsequent actions, including his nonchalant call to emergency services, revealed his twisted mentality. He showed no emotion or remorse when he informed the paramedics of his futile attempts at CPR and referred to Natalie's unresponsive state with indifference. As the paramedics loaded Natalie's body into the ambulance, John remained silent and emotionless, observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was pronounced dead, John was arrested. To justify his cruel actions, John made the excuse that the rough sex had gone too far and claimed his innocence. He alleged that Natalie had consented to the rough actions, claiming that she had initiated them and that she had been the one who desired all these brutal actions. According to John, Natalie allegedly requested rough sex, including being injured, beaten, and even having a bottle of carpet cleaner inserted into her. John claimed that, despite bleeding and in pain, Natalie allegedly reassured him that she was safe and wanted to continue. However, John's account is not credible. He attempted to deflect blame by saying that Natalie had agreed to engage in rough sex and that they had engaged in similar acts many times without issue. When asked about leaving Natalie partially clothed at the bottom of the stairs, John offered a weak excuse, claiming it was a regular occurrence and that he had never provided a blanket because the house was always warm. Throughout the proceedings, John showed no remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on Natalie. His attempts to shift the blame left onlookers frustrated. Despite being convicted of manslaughter, John received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, but only served 22 months before being released. Natalie Connelly's case sparked widespread criticism and controversy, leading Fiona Mackenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. The movement aims to promote discussion about sexual assault and calls for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, the defense minimizes and legitimizes violence in intimate relationships, perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and devalues the experiences of survivors. However, in interviews, Fiona has been surprised that some people, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, have accepted it. The reason for this acceptance is that they believe the incident was isolated, not a systemic problem. However, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, with survivors being held responsible for the risks that may have resulted from their behavior. Such attitudes highlight the need for continued advocacy and education to challenge harmful beliefs and support survivors of sexual violence. The Domestic Violence Bill was passed by Parliament on July 6, 2020, and following royal assent on April 29, 2021, it became law and is known as the Domestic Violence Act 2021. This marks a significant step forward in combating domestic violence and preventing perpetrators from using harmful excuses to justify their actions. Natalie's loss has left a deep void in the lives of her family and friends. They are still grappling with the pain of her loss. However, their unwavering love and support for Natalie is a testament to her strong and resilient spirit. The community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and support survivors on their journeys to healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion are an inspiration and hope to those struggling. Although Natalie Connelly's life was tragically cut short, her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Her story will hopefully inspire us to come together to fight domestic violence and support those in need. Crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Neha Varma. Megha Deshpande lived with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini, in a luxurious neighborhood called Srinagar in Indore. This city known for consistently ranking as one of the cleanest in India. The fact that they resided in Srinagar, an area predominantly inhabited by the wealthy, suggested that the Deshpande family was financially well off. Megha worked for a multi-level marketing, MLM, company for a considerable time. MLM is also referred to as network marketing, direct selling, and pyramid selling. To understand how an MLM business works, imagine a pyramid structure. At the top is the company owner. When the owner recruits two individuals and they join the company, it creates a network. These two individuals then recruit more people to join the company, and the process continues. The company generates profit from each new member or associate that joins, allowing the business owner to constantly earn income through the growth of their network. Before moving to Indore, Megha lived in Yuan, a city approximately 35 miles away, with her husband, Nanai Deshpande. However, due to his job as a bank manager, Nanai remained in Yuan, while Megha relocated to Indore with her daughter and mother a few months ago. Thanks to Nanai's stable job and Megha's successful career in the MLM company, the Megha's family has a stable financial situation and does not have to worry about money. In the neighborhood where Megha lives, people are very united, and it is also very safe with very little crime. Residents have always felt safe, and nothing unusual has ever happened there until June 13, 2011, when that all changed. On that day, no one in Megha's family left the house until noon, and no one heard their voices. A neighbor walked by Megha's house, and then she noticed a very strange thing. Footprints made of bloody stains led around the house, alarming her. She quickly notified the landlord. And the landlord then knocked on the door several times, but received no answer. Next, the landlord attempted to look inside through a window and was met with a very scary sight. 3 women were lying on the floor, their bodies covered in blood. Overcome with fear, he quickly alerted the police. The brutal murder of the Megha family members sent shockwaves through the community. By the time the police arrived at the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside their house. Upon entering the house, the police officers were met with a gruesome scene: the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered. The police secured the crime scene and began their investigation. During this process, they found 2 bullet shells inside the house. One of the shells was linked to the gunshot wound that killed Megha, who had been shot in the head. However, despite a thorough search of the house lobby, the police were unable to locate the second bullet. A forensic team was called in to collect evidence from the crime scene. The bodies of the 3 women were then sent for post-mortem examination. As news of the murder spread, the entire city of Indore was left reeling in shock. The post-mortem report later revealed that 21-year-old Ashlesha and her 70-year-old grandmother, Rohini, had died from excessive bleeding caused by multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report confirms that Megha was the only one shot to death. However, it raises a crucial question for the police: if 2 bullet shells were found, who was the second shot intended for? Megha's husband, along with the public, also started pressuring the police, demanding that they solve the case quickly so that the criminals are held accountable to the fullest extent of Indian law. This makes it even more urgent for the police to solve this case quickly. To do this, several teams were deployed to investigate. One team analyzed the call detail records of the 3 victims, Megha, Ashlesha, Rohini. Another team re-examined the forensic evidence. Initially, the police have collected a blood sample from the crime scene that didn't belong to Megha, Ashlesha, or Rohini. The police then detained and questioned various suspects from the surrounding area. Based on the evidence collected, the police have recorded this as a robbery and murder case. Further investigation of the phone records revealed that there was a phone number that had called Mega multiple times and she had long conversations with this number. After obtaining detailed information about the number, the police found it was registered to a girl named Neha. They then began tracking her location to gather potential leads in the case. One day, the police located Neha near an ATM in the area. They promptly sent a team to bring her to the police station for questioning. After being informed of the situation of the case, Neha was left astounded. She explained that she initially met Mega at a shopping mall. Then, Neha had bumped into Mega while rushing, causing Mega to drop some items. As Neha apologized and helped Mega gather her belongings, they engaged in conversation and developed a rapport. And Neha even driving Mega to her car, marking the start of their friendship. Neha also discovered that Mega worked for a multi-level marketing, MLM, company. After exchanging phone numbers, they occasionally spoke over the phone. Neha's interest in the MLM business model led her to discuss it with Mega. However, the police found Neha's story suspicious, as her words didn't match her body language. As a result, the police questioned her forcefully and in a confrontational manner. Neha initially tries to hide her dishonesty, but under intense police questioning, she confesses. She then told the police a story that even surprised them. Neha Varma was a 23-year-old beautician who was known for her beauty and cheerful personality. Her father, a van driver, had limited financial resources, making it challenging for Neha to pursue her dreams. During this time, Neha met Rahul, and they developed a close friendship that blossomed into romance. At 24, Rahul was handsome but also struggled financially. Despite their similar financial situations, they deeply loved each other and wanted to get married. They sought opportunities to rapidly build wealth and achieve a comfortable lifestyle, securing their financial future. Neha and Mega met for the first time. Mega, who had a taste for expensive jewelry, was wearing gold ornaments that day. Neha perceived Mega as wealthy due to her jewelry and decided to approach her. Neha started approaching Mega by deliberately bumping into her, start chatting and befriending her. Neha started thinking about robbing Mega after getting to call her through phone calls. Neha then shared her plan with her boyfriend Rahul, telling him that Mega was extremely wealthy, making her an easy target. Rahul liked the idea, as it would solve their financial problems and allow them to live comfortably once they were married. Following this, Rahul started making plans to kill Mega and the two other women in her house. He thought that if he could get away with the crime without anyone finding out, no one would be able to file a complaint against them. Rahul finalized his plan but needed a gun to carry it out. Luckily for him, his friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, had a gun. Rahul had been planning to kill Mega and her family, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to execute his plan. That moment arrived on June 13, 2011. On that day, Neha called Mega and expressed interest in joining her multi-level marketing scheme, MLM. Unbeknownst to Mega, this was a ruse orchestrated by Rahul. Neha arrived at Mega's house early in the morning, and Mega asked her to fill out a membership form. However, Neha didn't know what information to fill in the form, so she asked Mega if she could get a friend arrive to help her. Mega agreed, and Neha then called Rahul, as planned. Rahul and his accomplice, Manoj, were waiting for Neha's call, and they immediately went to Mega's house. Once Rahul entered the house, he pulled out a gun and shot Mega at point-blank range, killing her instantly. The sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini, causing both of them to run into the lobby. Rahul and Manoj initially intimidated Ashlesha and her grandmother Rohini, demanding Ashlesha's ATM card and PIN in exchange for their lives. Ashlesha, hoping to be spared, quickly handed over the card. However, Rahul and Manoj were aware that they had been seen, and this posed a risk to their. To eliminate witnesses, Rahul attempted to shoot Ashlesha but accidentally shot himself in the foot instead. Manoj then took a knife and brutally murdered both Ashlesha and Rohini. After the killings, the three thieves, including Neha, Rahul, Manoj, stole approximately 1 million Indian rupees and valuable jewelry worth up to $500,000 rupees and Ashlesha's ATM card. Rahul, along with Neha and Manoj, had planned to use the ATM card to withdraw cash. However, their plan failed when Neha was arrested by the police. Rahul to file an untrue report at the police station and was arrested, but was later hospitalized due to gunshot wounds. The police matched Rahul's blood sample from the crime scene to one taken from him. It was a match. The police quickly solved the case and arrested the suspects. Following a prolonged and contentious court case, the three defendants, Neha, Rahul, Manoj, were sentenced to death by hanging in December 2013. The district court handed down this severe punishment due to the heinous nature of the crime, in which the defendants killed women from 3 generations of the Mega family. Physical evidence, including blood-stained clothing, knives, and jewelry, was recovered from the defendants by the police. One of the defendants, Neha, is currently serving her sentence in the central jail. Notably, she has been teaching a beauty parlor course to fellow female inmates while incarcerated. This case was notable for being the first time the district court had imposed a death sentence on a woman. Neha and Rahul's desire for quick wealth led them to get involved in a life of crime. It is fortunate that the perpetrators were caught. If Megha had not worn her valuable jewelry to the mall and had not trusted a stranger she met there, the outcome may have been different. Megha's husband, Nana Deshpande, was pleased with the court's decision and praised the judiciary and the police for their efforts. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Irene Cortez. Irene Cortez was born in 1980 in Granada, Spain. She is the eldest of a well-off family with a younger brother and sister. Her parents ran a small business, but her father died early. Her mother, Maria Lucas, took over and expanded the business, ensuring that her children did not lack anything. Irene was a beautiful, sociable girl who loved to be the center of attention. She married and became pregnant at the age of 17, then had a second child 2 years later. With the support of her mother and uncle, she continued to pursue education. In the early 2000s, Irene with her husband and 2 children moved to the resort city of Malaga and opened a disco bar. The bar became popular. The bar later transformed into a full-fledged nightclub and brought her profits. The couple welcomed their 3rd child and life seemed prosperous and stable. However, at the age of 25, Irene's husband was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison for trafficking illegal narcotics. He later died in prison under mysterious circumstances. Irene was left to raise her children on her own. She remembered how her mother had raised 3 children on her own and was determined to persevere. Irene successfully ran her own business, made a lot of money and had big plans for the future. In Malaga, Irene was immediately impressed by the hardworking and reliable man named Ferd. She was also attracted to him and Ferd always tried to please her. At the time, Irene's husband was in prison and she planned to file for divorce, but he died before she could do so. Irene and Ferd's relationship gradually blossomed into love. Ferd Saras, born in Baronia, Colombia, grew up in a large and poor family. When he was young, his parents separated in the early 90s. His siblings became independent and he lived with his mother. In 2001, Ferd and his elderly mother moved to Spain in search of a better life. They settled in Malaga, where Ferd took any job he could find to support himself and his mother. Despite Faird's humble background and Irene's 3 children from previous relationships, Faird and Irene decided to move in together. They settled in Irene's spacious apartment, and soon after, Irene became pregnant with their first child. Their marriage produced a total of 3 children. However, it is unclear whether they were officially married. Irene kept her first husband's surname, while the children born to Faird were given the surname Saris. In 2009, Irene's life took a negative turn. Faird was arrested for drug trafficking and sentenced to prison, just like her first husband. Irene was left to care for her 5 children alone. Although Faird's sentence was 3 years, he was pardoned after serving only a year and a half for his good behavior and cooperation during the investigation. While Faird was in prison, Irene began a relationship with another man and lived with him. However, when Faird was released and discovered Irene's infidelity, he became furious. He threatened Irene and her new boyfriend, even intending to injure the man. Fortunately, the situation was resolved without becoming a serious problem. Later, Faird decided to forgive Irene for the sake of their children's happiness, and they decided to continue living together. However, Irene's relatives were still suspicious of Faird's intentions. Irene's mother and uncle believed that Faird was only interested in Irene's wealth and did not support their relationship. Irene's older children from a previous marriage could not accept Faird, but the youngest child, who had been raised by Faird since he was 2 years old, considered him a real father. In early 2011, Faird wanted to return to Colombia to visit his homeland because his father was seriously ill. Faird's father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and his sister had informed him of his health condition. Irene also wanted to visit Colombia and decided to go with her husband. She wanted to meet Faird's father for the first time and experienced the famous Baronia Festival, an event that usually takes place at the end of February. For Irene, the trip was also a much-needed break after years of hard work and raising 5 children without a break. Irene and Faird had planned a 10-day trip, and her mother and sister had agreed to take care of the children during their absence. Although Irene's mother had concerns about the trip, she did not take them seriously. However, at the time, Irene's family was in financial trouble due to an unfortunate business. The situation became worse when Irene discovered that the €3,000 in personal savings she had kept at home had disappeared the night before they left. This almost caused their plans to be cancelled. But Irene quickly found a solution and borrowed money from her uncle and some close friends. She then booked plane tickets in a hotel in the city center, ensuring that they were ready for the trip. Irene and Faird arrived in Colombia on February 27, 2011. Upon arrival, they checked into a hotel and Irene called home to inform her mother that the flight had gone smoothly. 2 days later, Faird broke the bad news of Irene's death to her 14-year-old eldest son, initially claiming it was an accident. However, the truth was soon revealed. Irene had been murdered during a robbery at an entertainment venue in Baronia. The case attracted widespread media attention in Colombia. Initially, the story revolved around Irene, a Spanish tourist who was murdered by robbers and fled the scene, leading to a massive police manhunt across the city. But the circumstances of the robbery and murder were unusual. The attackers did not appear to have been interested in stealing valuables, instead shooting Irene in the heart before fleeing the scene. Upon arriving at the scene, Faird's calm demeanor during interviews with police and media representatives raised suspicions. Authorities confirmed Irene's murder and said that her remains would be repatriated once the investigation was complete. As investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the scene, the mystery of Irene Cortez's death began to unravel. The footage was important because it captured Irene and Faird Garris meeting Faird's brother, sister, and wife on March 1st. That evening, the group spent time attending a festival, walking around town, and then going to a local bar for dinner at Faird's suggestion. As the time passed 1 a.m. and the bar emptied, Irene's group were the only customers left, along with the bar staff. However, things took a turn for the worse around 2 a.m. when two men who seemed uncomfortable walked into the restaurant. What worried the manager was that the two men did not order any food or drinks, and their behavior was very suspicious. Furthermore, their youthful appearance prompted the manager to check whether they were of legal age. The young men refused to show identification. When asked to leave, one of them pulled out a gun and pointed it at the manager. His accomplice pulled out a knife but quickly moved out of view of the camera. The gunman pushed the manager aside, approached Irene's table and announced his intention to rob her, demanding her cell phone and cash. The accomplice with the knife reappeared, presumably to collect valuables, while the gunman threatened the group. The gunman ordered Ferd to stand up so he could search her pockets. As Irene attempted to grab her purse, the attacker shoved her with his gun. A shot was fired as he grabbed the purse, hitting Irene in the chest. She fell to the floor, and the attackers fled without taking anything. Faced with a dangerous situation, Ferd and his brother chased the attackers while his sister tried to treat Irene's wounds. At that time, the brother's wife called for help, but the attackers escaped too quickly to catch up. The emergency services arrived quickly, but Irene died of her injuries on the way to the hospital. After the robbery and murder at the bar, which left Irene dead, law enforcement agencies mobilized all possible resources. Since the city was in the midst of a crowded holiday season, ensuring their safety was of utmost importance. A large reward was announced, 10 million pesos, equivalent to 3,500 euros, for information leading to the perpetrator. Shortly after, a suspect named Brian Dario was arrested. He later gave the name of his accomplice, Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, 18, voluntarily surrendered in the hope of a lighter sentence. During Brian's interrogation, he claimed that his financial situation, debts, and the need to care for his sick child with high medical costs led him to commit the crime. These statements were later confirmed by his relatives. Brian also claimed that the shooting of Irene was an accident while he was trying to snatch her handbag. Juan Carlos also claimed that he was involved in the crime unintentionally. He said that Brian did not reveal his detailed plan but asked for help in his work. Juan claimed that he only carried a small knife to threaten, not to cause injury, and left the scene when he realized Brian's true intentions. However, surveillance camera footage contradicts Juan's statement, showing that he returned to Brian. With both suspects arrested and confessing to the crime, the case seemed to be solved and prison sentences awaited them. The court found Brian guilty of robbery and murder, with aggravating circumstances, and sentenced him to 23 years in prison. Meanwhile, Juan received a 17-year sentence for his role as Brian's accomplice. From the beginning of the investigation, Irene's family accused Ferd of orchestrating the murder of his wife. Irene's mother and uncle hired a private investigator to conduct an independent investigation, gathering additional evidence and files to hold Ferd responsible and prove his involvement in the case. According to Maria Lucas, Ferd was the only person who knew about the 3,000 euros hidden in Irene's house, and he was also the only one who could have secretly accessed the money. Another important detail is that Ferd used his father's illness as the main reason to go to Colombia. However, in reality, Ferd's father was not diagnosed with cancer and he is still healthy for his age. Juan was clearly scared and likely didn't understand what was happening as Brian approached and went up to Ferd and lifted him without directly threatening him with a gun. It seemed like the men knew each other and were acting together. Then, Ferd oddly moved behind Irene, who was sitting at the table, when she reached into her bag for her wallet. The man with the gun looked at another man as if waiting for a signal. It's unclear if he received any sign, as Irene and Ferd had their backs to the camera. After the shot, Ferd chased the killer but, according to experts, he deliberately let him escape. However, this claim is controversial because Brian was armed, and Ferd might have feared for his life. Faird's behavior after Irene was declared dead was also questionable. He willingly gave interviews to reporters, discussed the details of the incident, and didn't appear too upset or depressed. Another important question is why, after the tragedy, Faird called Irene's 14-year-old son instead of her mother, uncle, or any adult relatives to inform him of her death. Pedro Lucas, Irene's uncle, broke the silence by giving a press interview in which he openly expressed his suspicions and investigation findings. He firmly believed that Faird had meticulously planned the trip to trap Irene. According to Pedro, Faird used the stolen money to hire a killer and had plans to acquire guardianship of the children and take control of the business after Irene's death. Faird's mother vehemently defended her son against the accusations. She claimed that Faird truly loved Irene and the children and would never harm them. However, while defending Faird, she inadvertently revealed that he had a tendency to take offense when his pride was hurt, particularly when it came to Irene's loyalty. Furthermore, a disturbing revelation emerged that Faird had left Spain using forged documents, as he was not permitted to travel due to his recent parole release from prison. In response, Faird denied the claim, stating that he departed the country legally, with Irene acting as his guarantor. Irene's body was finally returned to her native Spain 12 days after the tragedy. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the coffin had to remain closed throughout the ceremony. Hundreds of mourners attended, including family, friends, neighbors, and even strangers who were moved by Irene's story. However, one person who was absent was none other than Faird. Faird chose not to return to Spain for the funeral, fearing retaliation from Irene's relatives. He claimed that they had repeatedly threatened him and his elderly mother, and so he decided to delay his return. Before attempting to return, Faird sought a protection order from the authorities, but his request was denied. Feeling unprotected, he decided not to risk attending the funeral. Instead, Faird took his concerns to court, filing a complaint against Irene's relatives, Maria and Pedro Lucas, alleging that they were preventing him from returning home. However, the couple denied Faird's complaint, claiming that they actually wanted him to return to Spain to stand trial. Further investigations and trials were conducted with new details and charges against Faird. Brian and Juan, who were serving time in a Colombian prison, were questioned about their relationship with Faird and the possibility of a premeditated plot. However, Brian completely denied this theory. He maintained that the murder was simply the unintended consequence of a robbery gone wrong. Brian claimed that he had never met Faird before and denied being hired as a hitman to kill Irene. The allegations seemed to lack any basis, with no clear evidence of premeditation or contract killing. There were only assumptions and interpretations of events from the recording. Brian admitted that he had consumed alcohol and drugs that night, so he did not remember the events clearly. Juan insisted that his friend had nothing to do with Faird's plan and that everyone was shocked by what happened in the bar. Juan appears to be telling the truth, but the testimony of Brian, who fired the fatal shot, raises doubts. Although he did not commit the robbery, Brian's sick child is receiving expensive treatment in hospital. Brian claims that someone kind helped, but the lawyer claims that the €3,000 stolen from Irene were used for treatment. There are rumors that Brian accepted prison to save his child and secretly transferred the money to his wife, but this has not been proven. Faird only returned to Spain after a court order to ensure his safety. Months passed and media attention waned. When he returned, Faird claimed to have evidence proving his innocence in the murder of his wife. The main reason for his return was to take care of the children he had with Irene, who had been cared for by Irene's relatives during his absence. 6 months later, Faird revealed in a major interview that his life had changed completely. He lost his job, had his passport confiscated, and was unable to leave the country. Worse still, his friends turned their backs on him. His late wife's mother and uncle prevented Faird from seeing his children. Ferd repeatedly confronted Maria and Pedro Lucas in court. He accused them of threatening him, while they tried to prove that Ferd was involved in Irene's death. However, neither side could provide convincing evidence. As a result, Ferd's children remained in the care of his grandmother and uncle. Ferd was also unable to reclaim any of his late wife's assets.